and set for the big race, Yogi. On your marks, go! My name is Bob. My daddy's here to do some research. And Mommy says you're not dead. Is that true? It did, Mommy. It fell down the stairs and was lying there, and I saw it. It's the truth, Mommy. Honest, I saw it roll down the stairs. Today I saw my new girlfriend again, and they said to tell you hi. Can you get me some candy? I did my best, only Mommy wouldn't listen to me. Parents never listen. They always do what they want.
Well, I didn't ask you, did I? Lousy lesbian.
Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to Attack of the 70-Foot Podcast. I am your host, the always uninteresting Calvin Modier McCarthy. Of course, with me I have my always reoccurring co-host, Chris Jaiwardna. I'm getting closer and closer to pronouncing your name correctly.
Dude, that was actually pretty good.
Was that good?
Yeah, yeah, you're like 85-95% of the way there, man.
And please, both of our listeners, give a very warm welcome to Monsieur Michael Gibson. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Michael. Who are you? What do you do?
Hey everybody. My name is Michael. I'm a local sound person, sound post and production mixer for the Portland indie scene. And I've worked with both Calvin and Chris on a couple of different occasions. Mm-hmm. And I love supporting their projects. And this is my first time on the podcast, and I'm super stoked.
Yeah, and you're a filmmaker yourself, correct? I mean, I know that you're writing a couple of things.
Oh, I'm writing a couple of things, but I haven't got anything under my belt yet. I think once this crazy crisis lifts, there'll be hopefully a short, and I'm also working on a feature. So I'm aspiring to be that.
It just makes you think, I guess, Joe Bob Briggs had one of his, to hell with aspiring speeches put up on YouTube. So it's like, as soon as you said aspiring, it's like something like fuck aspiring. Just you do it. Go do it. Yeah. And when you've done it, you're doing it,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I love Joe Bob. I love all of his rants that he has about the film industry and how about, that it's not LA anymore. LA is just producing a bunch of, shit that just goes into the theater and is forgotten about. It seems to be sort of the indies that are the things that are the most memorable these days.
Yeah, but that's the thing though. Joe Bob has had, old man yells at cloud down pat since the mid 1990s. So
right.
Not surprised. But it's interesting to bring him up though, because I know that there's in the news lately, there's been some kerfluffle like on some of the social media and horror community stuff about him. There was an article that was put out about, kind of his politics and things like that and his perspectives and things like that. But that will get us off on a much more serious track than I think this podcast goes into. So
what I will say, though, is his co-host on his new show that's on Shudder.
Yeah, Darcy the Mail Girl. Yeah.
Yeah, she and I are in Vengeance.
Really?
Almost all of my scenes are with her. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, she's one of the camp or one of the people who like lead these tours through Camp Crystal Lake. And I'm one of the campers, and like all of my scenes are with her. So nice. I always think that's pretty cool. Like, and I didn't know that she was on Joe Bob at the time. It wasn't until after, which I think is probably a good thing because I probably
you would have been. Yeah, I was about to say you would have been fanboying all over the place.
Well, and we all lived in this bungalow. Like I knew that she was a porn star. I knew that she does adult films. Not because I had seen them, just because other people were talking about them.
Yeah,
God, I saved myself.
Yeah, good.
I knew
catch
that
there.
she was a porn star. But yeah, I had no idea that she was on Joe Bob's show until after. So yeah. Anyway, moving right along, the subject of today's podcast are movies that Bob ruined, and what we're talking about when we reference Bob is the actor Giovanni Frezza, who is a child actor during the 80s, who was a child actor. I'm sure he's full grown now. In the 80s, who worked primarily with producer Fabrizio De Angelis, who produced all three of the movies that we're talking about today. He's probably most well known for House by the Cemetery, where he plays the character Bob. He's the focal point of the movie, and there is an inordinate amount of hate toward Bob in that movie.
Oh boy.
I mean, you can just, it takes you like 2 seconds. I was looking it up last night. I was just trying to find comments and YouTube reviews and IMDb reviews that are extremely hateful toward Bob, and it doesn't take you very long to find them.
Even movie reviews that are like positive about the film, like they always have to say, oh, he's awful. Yeah.
Right. And clearly he's dubbed by some woman in House by the Cemetery. And I mean, that's what's really distracting. But before we get into the films, I just want to get your guys' take on this, because what I've noticed from a lot of people in the horror community and sort of like the sci-fi genre community as well, is that most people hate children in genre films. I mean, it's kind of become like the funny thing to just to go in real hard on these child actors, like in Gamera movies and things like that.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, I don't know if you guys feel that way. I sure don't.
I don't feel, it's a case of I don't feel that way towards kids in movies. I've actually have never really felt that way towards kids in movies. There have been some, I mean, even when I was a kid, I actually felt like I took it personally, if somebody was like, it's like, oh, that annoying kid in that movie. And it's like, well, I related to that kid. So fuck you, man. Being 11 and 12 at the time, thinking that fuck you, man was like, the height of a witty comeback. Yeah, what's one of the interesting things about like horror fandom culture is that it feels as if it's become, and maybe not necessarily become, but I feel as if there are these waves of misanthropy, and it's a particular brand of misanthropy that seems to really, I think, gear towards children. And I think part of it is not to get too serious or heady about this, but I do wonder how much of this is that a lot of the people who are into horror are people who came from like abused families, and they came from really rough times. I know I was more into horror when I was going through a lot of hard times during my teen years. It was as I was getting my 20s and things got better, I kind of fell out of it. And I noticed that because of it, I think people like to pick on the kid because it's a weird like sort of projection thing. And it also projects their own fears as they then grow up and then realize, oh crap, I'm an adult and I'm having sex and getting married. I may actually have kids. And it's the fear of parenthood or the dislike of children as a concept. They can't connect, I feel is part of it. But yeah, it's always fascinated me, especially like the way they get on the case of like Gamera movies. But it's also, I think when you even look like in like comic book fan culture and like how there's this, Batman must be like serious and dark, man, because he's like the Dark Knight and it's all grim, and the whole grim dark Zack Snyder bullshit is it's a way of like shielding oneself in this protective like armor of hatred and and aggression. And it's like, dude, just take a chill pill, because I also do think, coming back to it, is okay, back to the movies themselves, a lot of these movies don't treat the kids as characters or as people. And I think that is one of the failings of kids in horror films, is that they're often like, they're objects, they're props. And it's like when you're playing a video game and you're dealing with the escort mission. The escort mission is the worst thing because you're having to babysit constantly. And anyway, I'm rambling at this point, but like that's at least I think part of I think where it's coming from is like this annoyance that people have. That is, I think, sometimes just them personally, how they come to it. But I don't know.
I like that last point that you make. When child actors are good, they're good, but when they're bad, they're like they could be really bad. And I think it's harder to incorporate a strong child actor character into a story or narrative. And it's kind of unfortunate that House on the Cemetery has to rely so heavily on Bob. And maybe he just wasn't up to chops with some of the better child actors out there. It's kind of a weighty role for a young one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually 100% agree with you, Chris. That's usually the point I come to, is that fans of this genre may just not be fans of having kids, or there's like a fear of having kids in general. And it's kind of a thing, especially within like the last decade, for a lot of men to be very strongly against having children. And I fully intend on having children. I like kids. I actually got into these movies when I was a very little kid, just with like free reign from my dad, who just let me get whatever the hell I wanted. So I kind of naturally think of these movies as being childlike, and it's especially like the Godzilla crowd. Even yesterday, it's funny that this just happened yesterday. I had somebody on my video that counts down my favorite Godzilla films, or ranks them from worst to best, and people just really go in tough at the fact that I like Godzilla's Revenge so much, that centers around a kid. Yeah. And I mean, that's their big focal point on why they hate that movie. Right. And it's funny because Godzilla is such a we all got into that shit when we were a kid.
And that's
90% of us.
Yeah, and it's a case of Godzilla gets to be the kid's friend, which is when we were children, that was our dream. Like, right. That's so cool, and
it's about not being bullied. It's like it's the perfect film for a kid. I guarantee you watched it as a kid and you probably liked it. It's only, now that you're older and jaded and,
Yeah, you can't forget that childlike wonder perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or if you do, then wow, your adulthood's gonna suck.
Right.
I mean, wasn't there that Doctor Who quote, which is, "What's the point in being an adult if you don't get to act childish whenever you want?"
Right. Like, that's my favorite thing about being an adult, is now I can do all of the things. I have more money to do the things that I like doing as a kid. I like theme parks and all that.
You can have ice cream parties and balloons and roller coasters. And
I do whatever the hell I want now. It's great. So I'm still like crossing off all like my childhood bucket list items.
Well, that's great. That's good perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Watch, we're already going to start getting hate on the comments, like right at this point. We're right about now.
Yeah, they're going to just stomp in, as like, start typing everything.
Screw this. I wanted to hear them hate on Bob.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's
going to be plenty of that.
We will.
Yeah, we will. We'll have our moments. Yeah, but but it was really cool to go through these three films. Two of them I already had seen. Actually, so Calvin, you didn't make it to the All Night Horror Film Festival last October, right? For House by the Cemetery.
I did not.
Yeah, because House by the Cemetery was the last one, and I think Michael, you were there. I think for that.
I was there.
Really?
Yeah, that was quite the night.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask if this was Michael's first go around with Fulci films in general. I think you came over and watched the New York Ripper.
I did. I did watch that one with you. So this is not my first go around. I think I've seen some other stuff.
Have you seen quick? Yeah, Zombie, right?
Yeah, of course. That's a classic. Did I watch that with you, Calvin?
I don't think so. I mean, I showed clips of it while we were filming for physicality reference for the Ghost. Yeah.
Yeah, but I had seen at least two of his films before that.
Mm. Yeah, it was.
The Beyond.
Oh yeah.
Right.
God yeah. Oh man, yeah, I got to see that with the live score by Fabio. Oh my gosh. But with these films though, and New Barbarians was a film I discovered through the Grindhouse Film Festival here at the Hollywood Theater in Portland, and the that was one of those films that like I saw the trailer, I immediately tracked it down within a couple of days, watched it with my best bro, Phil. Shout out Phil, hope you're doing well. That's right. It was your birthday this past week. And then he and I liked it so much that like it's sort of like a weird bonding thing. I tracked down the theme song and made that the ringtone for when he called me for like the next like 5 years after that. So that was cool to go back and revisit it. And yeah, and Bob, Giovanni's pretty fun in that. I mean, it's a case of, yeah, the voice is kind of annoying, but it's like he's a cool character. We'll get to that. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but yeah, it was great to revisit. But Manhattan Baby, as I was just mentioning to you, Calvin, I have questions.
I'm sure. And I figure we'll go in order of when they were released. So we'll go House by the Cemetery, Manhattan Baby, Warriors of the Wasteland. We'll front load it with the Fulci films here.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to wait for the Warriors of the Wasteland discussion. So yeah, I mean, let's just jump right into the featured reviews, I suppose. So in 1981's House by the Cemetery, directed by the legendary Lucio Fulci, who's one of my favorite directors, probably my second favorite director, and my favorite, and has my favorite style of filmmaking.
This movie is very Calvin.
This movie is very Calvin.
Yeah.
It's about a family, the Boyle family, who moves into a New England home after Dr. Boyle, the father, is assigned to go to the house by his boss after a colleague of theirs committed suicide after living in the house for an undisclosed period of time, which, first of all, fuck that. No way, no fucking way. If someone ever came to me and said, hey, our colleague and friend who killed himself, why don't you go stay at that house, that isolated house, and try to see if you can figure out why he killed himself? Fuck no.
Relatively speaking, it just happened. It wasn't like this happened like 20 years ago.
Right, yeah. I mean, it was their buddy, like someone they knew. And then especially once you pull up to that house, which is the scariest fucking house in the universe. It's got a graveyard outside. It's dilapidated and falling apart. You would take one look at that house in reality and say, he killed himself because he was tormented by ghosts, and you would leave. But yeah,
Mystery
like,
solved.
Cool, great. 20 minutes and you're done. 20 minutes, you're done.
It would take no time. It would take no time for me to figure out why he killed himself. But they move into the house that is haunted by a dark past. There are some killer bats. There's child crying that echoes through the house at night, and something stirring in the basement.
There's a tomb in the house as well.
There's a tomb in the living room.
And the house is just generally falling apart. I mean, it really is like top 5 horror movie houses, up there with the house in Psycho, just outside the Bates Motel.
This house is creepier, man. This thing
it's so dilapidated
all over.
Oh yeah,
it's overdone, and it's fine because it's a Fulci film, and people always talk about how this is sort of a like a Lovecraftian feel. I always feel that it also has kind of an Edgar Allan Poe sort of feel, very gothic horror. It's super overdone, and it's very visually pleasing. So of course you go with whatever looks the coolest, but this house is just, it's too much. It's too much. There's no way anyone would ever live in this thing.
But that's the kind of the charm though about the picture and about Fulci's style with these movies, is how there's this sort of sense of no one has any control. It's like a nightmare where you can't control your movements. You're just constantly embraced by this fear. And I think that's where the Lovecraftian sort of element comes in, that you're constantly afraid, but yet powerless to stop. I mean, like one of my favorite moments of that like nightmarish feeling is when Bob is trying to escape the cellar and his mom's trying to get the door open, and she's not thinking to just scream at him, get away from the door, I'm going to kick it down, which is like, a lot of parents' initial like thought in a situation like that. And instead she's trying to fuck with that key. And it's like, what is it, like 2 minutes of like with the key and like trying to unlock the door, and then and it's those drawn out scenes, and so they seem hilarious in some respects. It just keeps going and going, but that's the idea, I think, is to give the impression of what these nightmares feel like, where it's like, because I've had like night terrors and stuff like that, where it's like you can't stop it. The thing is coming, and the door is closed, and no matter how much you try, and even your efforts, you can't even decide to do anything else. You are locked in these rails, on the roller coaster. And it was very much of his style. I mean, actually, when we get to Manhattan Baby, I mean, that's kind of indicative, I think, of other parts of Fulci's style with these films. But yeah, that's something I love about it personally.
Oh yeah, I love the look of it. But you just have to accept it. Like I say, it's got that Edgar Allan Poe feel to it, where every story of Edgar Allan Poe, all of his short stories, I mean, like the universe that they exist in are just the most morbid, depressing universes in the world, where everything is like creepy and dilapidated, and that's this film too.
I gotta catch up on that stuff, man. Gosh.
This film just like it exists in this universe where it's like, yeah, they're just like, I think even Paolo Marco at one point as the dad is just kind of like, oh, there's like tons of scary ass homes that look like this in New England. I mean,
he's like, this ain't New York City. This is New England. Everyone's got a tomb in their house.
Right.
Yeah, it's totally normal to have it. It's like, it would flood, and so or it was it was the winter, and you couldn't bury them in the snow, so you would just bury Grandpa in the house.
Right. Yeah, it's just the universe that it exists in. It's clearly like not that creepy to them. And you just move past it. But it's something that I love about it. I love the look of the house. I love the interiors. The camera work is great, like around all cobwebs. But it's like, it's pretty overdone. Like, it's like, oh, this is too much. Scale it back. But I mean, if you have the ability to do that, you do that, at least in my opinion.
What's interesting about that point is this comes back to something I began to realize about horror film when I was last autumn or so. I started getting back into Val Lewton's movies, and it was when I was working on the last short film I did, with In Silence We Suffer, which Michael was sound person on. And the thing I realized is that there was a certain point where horror films were not allowed to look like horror films, where when you look at classic, and I'm talking like classic, I'm talking like Vampire, I'm talking about Nosferatu, I'm talking about Isle of the Dead and Frankenstein, because you watch a single shot in any of those movies and it's a horror film.
Right.
And then it feels like as the 60s and the 70s go in, like you could easily cut a different trailer for Texas Chainsaw, where it's like just like or one of those other kind of 70s horror films that's in that vein, and you could easily make it look like something else entirely. You wouldn't instantly recognize that it's a scary movie. It would feel maybe a little off-putting or a little overdramatic, but it wouldn't seem like a horror film. I mean, you could cut Last House on the Left's first act and parts of the third act and make it look like this kind of strange wanderer drama,
right,
and like Easy Rider. And I love that Fulci was one of those guys getting back to the style, and I feel like Argento and Bava, I think, were also part of this, where every single shot looks like a horror film. It looks scary. It's so over that you can never mistake it. I love that about it.
There's a fantastical aspect to it, and I like what you're saying. It's kind of like in the 60s and 70s, it became a little bit more like our reality, which in its own way makes it sometimes a little bit scarier, like, oh, this could happen in my house. But this is kind of like a super 10 out of 10 theatrical set deck, just cobwebs on top of cobwebs on top of cobwebs.
Yeah, which is the other thing I love about Fulci's movies during this time, and House by the Cemetery in particular, is, God, I love the amount of dust. It's like you could never ever clean it out enough. It's like it's like the blood of that house is dust.
Yeah, it's just like completely falling apart. The whole it's got like this kind of Scooby-Doo quality to it too. And I like what you said about like classic films. It does have that sort of Dracula's Castle look to it, where also in that movie, right, if you're Jonathan Harker or Renfield in the beginning and you show up to that castle, you go, no, fuck this. There's spiders everywhere. Forget this. There's something wrong with this place. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
No.
No, it's a fixer upper in the sense that you can fix it up with a can of kerosene and a priest.
Right.
And a wrecking
I'm
ball.
I'm
Yeah.
going to die if I stay in this house.
Right.
And interestingly, the exteriors of this house were used in Umberto Lenzi's film Ghost House too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a pretty famous little location, I guess. People like to travel to it. A bunch of Italian filmmakers used locations in this. I forget where this is exactly that they filmed.
It's in. I want to say it's in New York State, right? Because that would be
That
'cause
or Massachusetts or something.
could be Massachusetts. I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah, it's yeah, that house. It's still there. People like take pictures of the house and stuff. Um
So
Pretty-
before we get too far, and I know that probably again there's people that are gnashing their teeth about this. Oh, there might be people gnashing their teeth about this. We got to talk about Catriona McCall in this picture because Catriona, I think this is her last one, right, with Fulci?
it is yes, I think so.
Because that's the thing I know that a lot of people love about these movies is the actors, these American actors, or I should say non-Italian actors in these pictures. And I going back to this film, I forgot how much I liked her in this role. I mean, she's helpless, but there's something. I think how someone said that she's very endearing in these movies because the fact that the roles that her and some of the other women characters in Fulci's films from this time, there's something really something sweet and pure, so it doesn't make them come off as dumb, just that they're in situations way beyond their control and understanding. And it's more the case of the directors being sadistic but not them being a moron. And so it was good to good to see her in this. And I do have to say I appreciate that. I was really rooting for her to make it at the end, and she don't, and that was good. I kind of like that. It looks like South Lincoln, Massachusetts. House exteriors was the Ellis Estate House in Massachusetts. Why with your names? Skitchwet. I'm gonna post this in the chat, and you guys can see if you can want to take a crack at it.
See if we can decipher it. But yeah, she does have a good role. The movie does do this interesting undercurrent of like. The husband continually tells her that she might be kind of crazy and she needs to be taking her pills.
Right, it's always
carry the weight of that.
God.
Yeah, she has quite a bit less to do in this movie though than in the Beyond. That's the only thing about her role in this movie, and she's also in The Gates of Hell. She's in all three.
Yeah, and I would say she has the
constant.
The least to do in Gates of Hell though. I mean, Gates of Hell, like their whole story of her and the reporter is like they don't even need to be in the movie.
Well, she's the one who dies. She sees she has the premonition and then dies and then is like dug up when she wakes back up in the coffin.
No, I mean
I kind of like her in that. It's funny. I like her more when she has more of a dynamic character. In this, I mean, she's just mom, she just kind of screams and
okay, I see what you mean. Yeah.
She's good in it, and actually I like everyone. I think Paolo Marco is pretty good in this movie too.
And Anya Pironi as
she's beautiful.
She's beautiful, and my God, just those eyes, like seeing on the big screen in particular was just like got all this laugh because just like stare. Hi, I'm the babysitter. And
Fulci has a pretty bad reputation with working with some of his women actresses. He has famously said that he loves women. He doesn't like bimbos, as he says. He doesn't.
Boy.
So that was not Catriona McCall. I guess he absolutely loved her. But interestingly enough, people tend to mention that there's a couple other ones where he isn't being very cruel toward women, except for the fact that the actress Carla DeMeo, who plays the realtor, she is primarily used in a lot of giallo films from around the time. I'm pretty sure it's her, and she's always nude. She has really big boobs or something. That that she was basically just always cast to get naked. And in this film and another film, she's in another Fulci film. In both films,
you're talking about Daniela Doria, the one from the opening.
no,
The real
no,
estate agent.
yeah, it's
Oh,
Carla
the real estate
Deschamps.
agent. Yeah.
She in both of Fulci's films,
Sorry,
he
I'm getting
keeps her
confused here.
very clothed up and makes her very non-attractive. And she was primarily used as a naked, attractive
Yeah.
older woman. So he still is sort of getting back at the women, the actresses that he deemed to be quote unquote bimbos in the industry, I suppose. So there, it's still subtly in there.
Yeah, that being said, her death is like extremely like sexualized in this movie.
Right. She's just being stabbed with the
hot poker.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! Wow, I cannot believe I actually forgot about that because my brain is so fried. God.
Yeah, they really sell it with the voice of the assailant in that scene.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's kind of like grunting and yeah, just the fact that that she's very unsexy in this film, and I forget the other Fulci film she did, but I know that he did that to her twice, where she was, like I said, primarily used as the sexy older woman, and he like bundled her up and made her kind of like old and unsexy. Which is pretty unflattering, and to be fair, maybe that's how he should have got back at these women that he didn't like, instead of like some of the other films he obviously puts them through the ringer in other ways. This is much more subtle, and you wouldn't even notice it unless you knew. Yeah, Fulci is an interesting guy.
Yeah. I mean, that's
complex.
If we're gonna go into grindhouse discussions about directors, and especially the Italians, my God, it's gonna get
right. Yeah.
Anything even giallo adjacent, especially.
Right. But yeah, this movie, it grows on me every time I see it, and I sort of wish that I wouldn't have done a video a while ago where I was doing all of my Fulci films in order, because this movie and The New York Ripper both climb my list every time I watch it. And House by the Cemetery, the first time I saw this one, I wasn't the biggest fan. I know that it's part of the Gates of Hell trilogy, but it doesn't really feel right thematically. This one, whereas the other two are kind of like non-linear vignettes. The Gates of Hell just open, and you get a series of events that sort of happen due to the Gates of Hell opening. This one is much more. It's more linear than the others. There's like a solid core of characters that we're following, and it never really felt right thematically, and I wasn't the biggest fan of it. And it's the more that I watch it that I really, really appreciate this film a lot. I think it sort of like achieves this like odd, like kind of cinematic poetry at times. It's just so like dreamlike and nightmarish and gothic, and it's just it might be the prettiest of the three. It's kind of a hot take, but I think
it's arguably, yeah, because I think it's the set and the lighting is very. They're able to do a lot more with that set, I think, than in some of the locations in Gates of Hell and in the Beyond. I would say like Gates of Hell is probably the most atmospheric because of the way they use the town and the landscape. But to me, I really felt a incredible strong presence of place in the Beyond, just because of the use of shadows, and that was beautifully executed. But I think with the House by the Cemetery, I think what you're pointing out is it's the details. It's not just simply, this has, it's true. It has this kind of more linear plot, which can make it both a little slow, because I think the nonlinear plot gave them room to like kind of keep the tempo going,
Right.
as you go through the picture. And as well, it's a point where the high points of the movie come rather infrequently, and they don't seem to be more regularly than not. They're almost kind of disappointing in the sort of the climax of them. It's like the deaths are amazing, but they're it's a case of when you've seen the Beyond, when you've seen the stuff in Gates of Hell with like the drill and the gut vomit and stuff like that. Those are really like, holy shit, I'm never gonna forget that kind of scenes. And House by the Cemetery, despite actually having probably some of the best effects and some of the best gore in Fulci's films of this period, I think the catch is the concepts of them aren't as like standout. Even though I think, because I mean, visually, the most memorable is obviously when Anne gets her head decapitated and then seeing the head bouncing down the stairs like a ball, which I wonder if that's a Kill Baby Kill reference, to be honest. Like that was where it was like, oh shit, like that's the stuff I remember. But I don't know.
That scene is pretty cool.
It's amazing.
That scene is really overdone.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's where it starts to reach that like elevation, what you expect out of a Fulci movie. Yeah. Yeah, I agree though. I just to quickly interject, I mean, I was very underwhelmed the first time I saw it, and then I realized the second time I saw it how much I'd actually forgotten of it and how many things I liked about it with the second time around. And now having seen it kind of 1.5 times since then, I mean, yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite 80s Italian horror films now.
Yeah, it's got this this quality to it that just benefits from multiple viewings. And I think that, yeah, the other two are, it's just kind of got this kinetic energy, and it's about these like individual scenes that really stand out. This one is just, there's something about it that's sort of it's just infectious, it just grows on you. Kind of in this like really, it's hard to explain. I this is such a curious one to me. This has always been the curious one to me, because I've probably seen it more than the other ones in the trilogy.
Interesting.
It's just the one that, for whatever reason, I go back to. But it has always been my least favorite of the three. So I don't know what it is about this film, and it's a case of like the first few times I saw it, I absolutely hated like the endless sort of like red herrings in it, and like references to other films. There's like the whole aspect of, is Bob imagining all this because the doll that the little girl has looks like her, and the parents never see the doll, and then the babysitter Anne is a mannequin that has her head fall off, and like some in like Bob's imagination in the beginning.
Yeah, like a premonition.
Right.
There's also like an aspect of like The Shining. There's like a
very
literal,
Shining
like,
vibes.
like rip-off moment, like in The Shining, where the waiter is telling Jack that he's always been the caretaker. There's the scene in the library with this one where like you're supposed to, I guess, think that maybe he is the guy who committed suicide. So there's kind of these like weird like red herrings that are almost going on that don't mean anything. And that was something that really bothered me at first, and now I really like those elements a lot.
Well, as I was saying, it's like that's again like a dream logic where you have this vague impression of something that may or may not be what it is, but you feel that it's that because your brain's trying to kind of coalesce or these different aspects or different pieces of information and somehow create a logic that really isn't quite solid. Everything's ephemeral.
Yeah, there's even the aspect of like the photo in the beginning with the little girl in it. There's kind of this like maybe alternate universe thing going on too. The ending is the one that makes that still to this day I ponder what that ending is supposed to mean, because it could go like a number of different ways, whereas with the Gates of Hell and the Beyond, I feel like are sort of bizarre but still pretty straightforward. It seems like there is a right and wrong answer to them. And with this
Mhm.
one, it's like, are they in a different universe? And it's like Bob is kind of going to this other.
Other dimension.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
are
got
they
this
in the same
weird-
house but trapped in a different time? Yeah,
Right.
May and Miss Freudenstein really confuse me, and they make that line about like she's not buried outside, even though her tomb is out there. So
Right.
where is her body? Is that a real thing or is that an imaginary thing?
And when he
Right.
comes up out of the tomb at the end, is he really dead? Are they all like the ghosts now? And
Sort of like a rebirth.
right,
Because I mean, that was even the thing is now they're corporeal. They're able to grab him and help. May's able to help pull him out, right, at the end. And it's
right. And is
so
that him going to the afterlife? And in reality, he's dead in the basement with his parents. Did his parents ever exist?
Yeah, it gets wild. And again, that's yeah. Whereas the Beyond is clearly, I think of the three is the most clear
Right.
one-to-one logic.
They're trapped in hell.
Yeah, yeah.
You guys got-
The gates opened and they get kind of sucked in the hospital at the end, and like the whole world is consumed, and that's kind of it. That's the end. Yeah. So one of the things actually to that note about it, what's interesting looking up the picture is that apparently this was the film where Dardano Sacchetti and Lucio Fulci were starting to have a lot of differences creatively about where to take their scripts and their ideas. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this aspect of the story. Yeah, about how Fulci wanted this to be kind of his tribute to Lovecraft, but not directly based on any story. I think that's even why there's a character named Mr. Wheatley, which I think that's a Dunwich Horror reference. I think, right? Or is
It's definitely very Lovecraftian.
at the very least, it's probably a Dennis Wheatley reference, who is the author of like The Devil Rides Out and To the Devil a Daughter, the novels that is. And how the idea was that Sacchetti wanted to do the turning of the screw, hence the kids and the ghostly kind of happenings, the kind of more gothic elements, which is interesting. I guess Fulci really was unhappy with that, and then that carried over into the next film we'll be talking about in a second, and I guess how that was another case of like, okay, how are we going to make this work? And so it sounds like it just went through so many different kind of changes through the process that what narrative is there is kind of a jumbled mess, because you're trying to graft this piece onto that piece, or do this and that, and so you have essentially a script doctor, Fulci himself, and then Sacchetti and Sacchetti's wife, all contributing material, and it's a mess, but yet at the same time, I think the skill of Fulci as a director is how, even though we ask these questions, we still like it, and I do think that speaks to us just liking ambiguous stories as well.
Yeah. Do you guys have your own ideas of what the ending of this is or what it means?
I just take it as very much this dream logic. I don't take any of it too seriously. It's kind of like Mulholland Drive, because pretty much there's clues at the front and back of Mulholland Drive which say, oh yeah, it's all a dream. None of it's real.
Right. Yeah. I guess like Lost Highway is another one that's sort of like that too.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, it could follow very much like what the kind of some of the interpretations of The Shining are, which is another movie that kind of defies like pinning it down
Right.
to one meaning. But yeah, that there's like it kind of alludes that there's like a presence to this house, or like an ageless or a timelessness to the house in which May and Mrs. Freudenstein live. What a great name, by the way, Freudenstein. That's a really good horror name. But yeah, that he like joins them in this like alternate reality of this haunted house.
Yeah, the Freud references are another aspect that I wish maybe had been like expanded upon a little bit more, because obviously, right, like the kids are the focal points of the story. At least Bob is. It seems to be told through his eyes. Also, Dr. Freudenstein has this weird thing with crying like a little child. So it seemed like that was like a little undeveloped or something that got
some red
lost.
herrings.
Yeah.
Right. I would have liked to see that expanded upon a little bit more, like the aspect of children, this whole Freudian aspect, because of course Sigmund Freud is famous for his
Being
work
an asshole.
with his work with child psychology. So
Right.
there was obviously something there that maybe they were intending on getting at, or maybe something that I'm missing. And that was always like an aspect to the ending, that in the like weird quote at the end too.
Yeah, what is it? I
No
think
one
that
knows if children are monsters or monsters
right
are
is their
children, or
children.
something.
Yeah, that's something like that. Yeah,
A great moral to the story.
Yeah, it's like, wait, what?
yeah.
It's very M-like.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's another movie that this has like strange kind of shades of, and it's a really curious movie.
Yeah,
And I love it.
yeah. Oh no, it's worth loving for sure. Agreed. It's the thing also is that it comes at a, to mention how messy it is, it comes at this fascinating time in the career of Lucio Fulci, because I was looking up when you look at his filmography on IMDb, you go from Zombie to Manhattan Baby, and Manhattan Baby kind of being sort of almost the combo breaker, at that point, where between Zombie and Manhattan Baby, or around that period, he does 6 episodes of a mini series and then 6 films through 1979 through 1982. 6
Wow.
films. And this is like smack dab right kind of the end of the middle and towards the end of that period. And even after, I think, Manhattan Baby, he still goes right off after he has the falling out with Fabrizio and goes straight off into Conquest right after that. Like it's just amazing how prolific this guy was, and to be able to essentially just be rushing through these projects, and then with all this tumult in the middle of it, of trying to balance these script changes and disagreements with the writers or disagreements with producers, as we're going to get to in a minute. And it's a trip that he was able to make these films as coherent as they were, and yet also have these wonderful like ideas that are like, oh man, I want more. I agree. I want more. I want more fleshing out. The Freudenstein thing would be awesome. The family backstory, it's not one of those things of like, well, if you explain it all, it ruins it. But it's that, I think it's because there's a certain point of understanding. Because I mean, as much as I enjoy this film, I don't think I would call it my favorite of the Gates of Hell trilogy. I wouldn't call it my favorite Fulci by a long shot. But it's a special film that I think, has something very distinctive about it that I would just love. It makes me desire more, because what it has is so much potential.
Yeah, I don't know if explaining it anymore would make it any better or any more enjoyable of a film. There are just little kernels of things that probably could have been there in the place of some of these other little red herrings that they didn't develop either. You could have lost maybe some of the the aspects of, oh, there's no one buried in these tombs, and concentrated more on the Freud thing, or, could have lost, you could have lost the babysitter altogether and developed, something else to this house. I don't know what that would be, but I don't know if it would make it any better. There are certain elements that I think are brilliant, and other ones where I'm kind of like, meh,
Yeah, some more connective tissue between some of these core elements and themes. I think that would have really helped it out. I guess I had a question, if you guys could like help clarify. What was the dad researching? And at the end, can we talk a little bit about like the creature design and like what their motivations were? Because there's some sort of like immortality thing going on, right?
Right, yeah. He's there researching. He figures out that his coworker killed himself due to the haunted house, right? He listens to like that audio recording of him babbling on about Dr. Freudstein and the crying, which you would think at that point, movie over, like just go home and get your family and get out of there. But then
I think they do try to do that, but the realtor's like, there's no other house in the town. You guys got to stay here for a few more days.
Sleep in the car.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty weird that they send not a private investigator, not a detective, that they send like his coworker to go figure out why he killed himself.
Yeah, and he seems to be like some sort of like a historian. It almost seemed like, was at least what I caught from it.
He becomes fascinated with Dr. Freudstein himself, which I think is supposed to be alluding to him suffering maybe from the same issues that the other doctor suffered from before killing himself. I'm guessing that that's sort of what they were getting at. that Dr. Boyle is
Mhm.
like becoming the guy who killed his own family and then himself.
Yeah, very, very Shining.
Very Shining-esque.
Mhm.
I think it would have been stronger had they built a little bit more into like the career reason why he's there. Like if he's also a psychiatrist, and he's like
Right.
studying certain like mental disorders. And then that would also tie into the antidepressant pills that his wife is taking, and then
Right.
maybe the Dr. Freudenstein was a pioneer in, you know,
My goodness,
psychiatric
it's
medicine. Yeah, something.
oh no, you've been reading Screenwriting 101,
Yeah,
haven't you?
That makes too much sense. Although, yes, I'm always reminded when I watch this film that that the dad Paolo Marco isn't he's not a reporter. Because I always like assume, oh yeah, he's a reporter and that's why he's there. No, he was a
No.
collie. He's a doctor.
Yeah.
Which that would have been an easy fix, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
If
No.
just like, well, he's a private investigator that this medical firm or whatever hires to go figure it out. Why does he take his family? I don't know. That's another weird theme in
thing.
Italian
Yeah.
films.
Yep.
If you guys have ever seen the Jess Franco cannibal film White Goddess, that's like the best example. He's like this explorer in the jungle, and he's like got his wife and kid with him, and it's like they reach this island and they're like, oh, there are like cannibals on this island, and finally the mother is like, maybe we shouldn't have brought our daughter along.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you think?
Yeah, but how are we going to have the daughter in peril to get, molested, raped, and murdered?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's because that's always the thing with these kind of Italian pictures. They have to use of family is always merely for shock value as an exploitation picture.
Right. At least in this movie, it they don't go that direction.
It's
like told through Bob's eyes for the most part.
So before I have one last thing really, or one big thing related to Bob, but before I get too far ahead, I did actually look it up. So the actress you're thinking of is Dagmar Laszender. It's not Carla De Moya.
Right. Yeah. I realized that as I just
because that was because it was a combination of Carlo De Mejo, who's the Mr. Wheatley, who is, I think, I looked that up as well. That is a reference to, I think, Wilbur Whateley from Dunwich Horror, or Dennis Wheatley. Either way it works. Anyway, just wanted to make sure that clarification was made. We're not
right.
We're sometimes having to fly by the seat of our pants because we are also busy with our different projects and stuff.
I do this off my head. I don't take any notes or anything.
Top-notch fact checking.
Yeah, there you go. I'm glad that someone was fact checking. I'm sure that there is someone who's deleting their comment right now that they wrote months ago.
It's like taking them like an hour to write like 15 paragraphs, and like in the middle of paragraph 7, they're just like, oh, okay, hang on.
Oh, they fixed it. They fixed it.
But the thing I was going to get back to the Bob situation is that, as of the three movies, this is the one I think that features him probably the most, and
absolutely.
And it's the one where I also like him the most too. I was really rooting for him to make it out of the situation okay and to get to do stuff, even though, he doesn't get to do as much fun stuff like in Wars of the Wasteland, New Barbarians, but it was still cool. And so I guess as we seem to be kind of winding down on the subject, I was curious, like, how many Bobs out of 5 would you give this?
3.5.
Yeah. Boy, I think I gotta go like a 4 or 4.5. I love this movie, and it grows on me every time. And right when we got into this discussion, Michael said this is very much a Calvin movie, and every time I watch this, that's another thing that I remember, like how much of this movie I try to copy constantly in its lighting and the way it looks. I love everything about this movie, and it's so funny that the first few times I saw it, I was so underwhelmed. I actually like Bob in this. It's funny. It's so off-putting. His dubbing is so off-putting at first, but once you get over that fact, he's pretty good. I mean, it's hard to tell because he's Italian and he's obviously speaking in Italian, but I mean, he seems to be a fairly competent child actor. Mm-hmm. I don't really see anything wrong with him, but it is funny. I remember when Natalie and I first started dating, this movie was on, and we were watching it, and the first time he speaks, the first time he goes, who is that, mommy? Or I can distinctly remember Natalie going, "Oh God," just as out loud, just audible, just this. Oh gee, like, and I think that is everybody's initial reaction to that dubbing, because it's clearly a 40-year-old woman trying to dub this little boy.
Oh, both times the Hollywood theater that I've seen it, absolutely that was the response. But it is however, for me, the dub is saved by the line delivery of, "And Mom says you're not dead."
Yeah.
Is that true?
I also love just really quickly, I love the little girl in this too, who grew up to be, she's like really pretty now. She's like super, super good looking. And Bob looks exactly the same. Giovanni Frezza looks exactly the same.
He's still got that mop of hair.
He's like the mop hair.
I don't think he has the hair, but
it's iconic.
He does have a better his jawline filled out, so it's a little less cherubic. Yeah. No,
I do love the line, like I love the moment where they're telepathically communicating when Bob's in the car. That's actually one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. But I don't know why, it's got to just be the dubbing when they're like talking and it's all like super sweet at first, and then all of a sudden May goes, "You shouldn't have come here, Bob." It always makes me laugh. Just like I think it's just the delivery and like the abrupt switch. They're like, "Oh, hey," and the music's all nice, and she's just instantly like, "You should have not come here, Bob." Like, oh shit. Yeah. Some shit's going down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the poor dubbing adds a little bit to his creepiness. And I think that's a hallmark in all three of these movies, where there's like a very intense scene or funny scene or graphically violent scene, and then they cut to something completely completely wrong. And that's pretty key in the bat scene, where then it goes to a guy just yawning.
Right.
And you got to wonder how much of that is intentional, because that was my take when I first saw House by the Cemetery, is that a lot of those bizarre juxtapositions felt completely intentional.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Funny. It works.
Like the biggest laugh that the Gates of Hell gets, because I saw the 35 millimeter print they had that they were playing at the Hollywood about a year ago, where they, like, the reporter, that our hero, our two groups of heroes meet up, and he's like, "All right, let me tell you the whole story," and then it cuts, and the reporter goes, "So that's the whole story."
Yes, that's right.
And it just gets the biggest laugh, which is, it's got to be intentional.
Oh,
I mean,
Yeah. I mean, I even felt like some of the nonsensical dialogue or the kind of senselessness of House by the Cemetery felt like they were, at the time, I felt like, oh, they're just taking the piss. They're having fun. They know you're here to have a good time. You're going to be seeing this in either a complete dive of a movie theater or at the drive-in or something, and it's just you're just having a good time. You're going to, you and your significant other are going to make out in the back, and, you're going to throw popcorn at each other and shout and scream and stuff like that. They knew the audience they were making this for, and they I think that's when the snobs like to get in on films like this. It's kind of like, guys, it's about understanding what kind of thing it is. It's like, you're not gonna rate a Beatles song by the same standards you do Beethoven. It just doesn't work like that.
Right. And Fulci's no hack either. He had been doing this for a very long time. He was doing a lot of comedies and westerns, a lot of crime films before he ever got into horror movies. It's not like he got into the industry to make horror films. It's just in his late age where he ended up having some success. And I think that he was smart enough to know, as a filmmaker and at his age and with his experience, that the people who enjoyed this genre, he knew what they wanted to see, and he kind of just got to it. He knew that people weren't gonna. He knew what he was making, that it wasn't supposed to be overly heady and smart. He just, you can almost hear his voice sometimes when he's just like, "Oh yeah, just like put more blood on it." That's like what they want to see.
So that kind of, I guess, then goes into the film. I mean, I feel like that'd be a good segue into movie number 2, because that was where, things started to fall apart with him working with Fabrizio De Angelis, and as well was a film he was kind of dissatisfied with.
Yes.
Because
Right, Manhattan Baby.
This was supposed to be his biggest budget yet. I think I read that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
supposed to be.
it's his last theatrical film in the United States as well. This is another interesting one. Not one of his worst. Not one of his best. This is one that I enjoyed more like the first time I saw it, as opposed to The House by the Cemetery. My first initial reaction to this one was pretty positive.
Mm.
It's interesting with Manhattan Baby in that he was trying to make a point with not going with his more like visceral gore, and wanted to make more of like a traditional horror film that I guess didn't have to rely on its shock value. And he kind of goes back to that sort of kind of like vignette style of like doing these horror scenes that are a little bit nonsensical, but you got the very bare bones premise of this archaeologist and his family go to Egypt, and they uncover this tomb, and the daughter inexplicably gets this necklace, yeah, from this ghost witch lady, and now they're cursed, and everything that happens, all these little vignettes, are just due to this cursed object, and it unfortunately just doesn't, that style just doesn't really seem to work. You don't have these like kind of horrific horror scenes.
Yeah, it's a. Go ahead, please. Ashley, go ahead and finish your point. I have many things.
I adore the way that this movie is opened. I think the opening to this movie is great. I love all the sequences in Egypt. I love her meeting. I love the daughter meeting the witch.
That wide shot in particular of that scene is fantastic.
Right, and like when the father and the other archaeologists fall down into the tomb. I love all of that stuff. The fact that he like wanders out of the tomb blind. All of that I think is great. And then toward the middle, it's there are enough redeeming moments. I feel like I think there are things that are interesting, interesting aspects to the curse, but I can certainly see where even Fulci fans would just not be a fan of this one, because it's maybe a little bit too much of a departure from his usual horror style. Like all of his visual elements are still there. I think the camera work in this movie is great. I think it looks really pretty.
Good. Yeah.
The lighting is good.
Yeah,
a lot of close-ups on eyes.
Yeah, a lot of close-ups.
Yeah, because I guess the original title for this was called The Evil Eye, was originally what they were going for. And and that's kind of the fact that was even changed really, and seeing where that idea doesn't mesh with where the film starts to go becomes one of the big sad. It's kind of I honestly find it tragic that you're not seeing the vision as intended, because I think the goal that he and his writers were trying to like kind of shoot for was great and would have been fantastic, but it's like the fact that they had their budget slashed in half from and speaking contextually of this is in the early 80s, the early 80s,
same year as Poltergeist.
Oh boy, that's right.
Yeah. Do you get Exorcist vibes from this at all?
Oh
yeah.
Definitely.
Oh dude, definitely.
Even Exorcist 2.
Exorcist 2, yeah. Heretic, which I actually like, but that's a whole other discussion. But yeah, they went from $600,000 US to $300,000, and this is shooting across 3 different countries. You have your main shoot in Italy. You have second unit in New York, which it sounds like they used. It's kind of vague the way it's put on the Wikipedia, but so they might need some kind of grammar work. But kind of sounds like they sort of packaged it together with the second unit crew that was doing stuff for Bronx Warriors for Castellari at that time.
Interesting.
So, because they shot a bunch of material for Italian films in New York during the early 80s anyway, and then they have to go to Cairo, and going actually to Cairo, Egypt, and they're going to these landmarks and things like that, and it's to do that on $300,000 plus set builds, plus effects, plus, the not to get too far ahead, but the finale, the big death scene at the end. I mean, there is so much to do in that type of film that it's incredibly ambitious and incredibly bold, and it's sad to see it doesn't follow through. And it's not because of him. I really think it's the circumstances that were against him. I mean, they shot this in it looks like about roughly 6 weeks. So imagine doing all those company moves and all that coverage you got to get on the effect scenes and second unit and all that. 6 weeks for $300K. And this is, and this was during, I mean, hell, we're talking the early 80s. This is during recession,
Yeah.
So I mean, this was a rough time to be making a film anyway, and then you have all these circumstances against you. And it even kind of sounds like Lucio was sort of like the producer wanted to kind of go ahead with this as was, when he kind of was thinking, we should probably back off and not, try to make this happen with the circumstances we got. Because one of the interesting things that took me right away is how it reuses tons of music from other Fabio Frizzi.
Yeah, from The Beyond. There's a ton of the Beyond in there.
Exactly. It's really distracting. And then those other tracks, like the Egypt stuff, is bizarre. And then that freaking Manhattan jazz, man. Like it's like something out of a it almost feels like what would be almost like a De Palma or Friedkin take on a early 50s film noir, and I say specifically early 50 noir for reasons, but I'll talk about that later, another time. And I definitely agree with what you mean. It's like, I think some Fulci fans are going to have difficulty with it. It disappointed me, but at the same time, the parts that I liked about it, like, it won me over in the second half, because aside from the Cairo opening, the first 40 minutes is pretty sluggish. I think you get like the elevator kill didn't happen until about 50 minutes in. I think I have the file queued up. Let me queue this up. Okay, I took it about the elevator kills at 35 minutes, and minute 50 is skimming. Minute 50 is the letter. Oh, the photograph being dropped by the woman from the balcony. So it's that exterior. Which is the other thing that's interesting about this film is, my God, there are so many moving parts in this movie, and yet
it's a little
somehow
complicated.
Yeah. And it's at the same time, it's also really, it's not that it's difficult to follow. You're able to follow it. It's just that it's slow. It feels like nothing's ever moving for long passages of the picture.
Yeah, I really enjoy this movie. This is one that is sort of a guilty pleasure, one that I have a little bit of a hard time figuring out what it is that I like about it so much. I think it mostly has to do with its visual style. I stand by the fact that I think that it's beautifully shot, and there's a lot of, like, the camera moves in this movie a ton.
Moves are great.
It's got like kind of a kinetic editing to it, which makes it a little bit more fast paced. I think if there was one thing that could have fixed this movie, I think that there's not like a central threat to it. It seemed like, I mean, the girl is being possessed, and then Bob also is being possessed.
Kind of possessed.
It
feels like Bob Giovanni in this film, or Tommy as he's known in this one.
Right.
He's
always Bob.
Yeah, he will always be Bob to us. But it felt almost like he was sort of he was seduced by its influence to partake in it, and thus cause things to happen. So like, it was kind of clear that, at the very least, if not clear, it's very heavily implied that he probably is the reason their caretaker babysitter gets killed.
Right, Jamie Lee. I think that if they would have settled on, okay, both the kids are possessed, and like, I don't know if maybe they become like Reagan-esque exorcist demons or something, but I think that they needed to decide on that a little bit more. That there are certain elements to the curse that I think are cool. I love when the like goofy reporter guy walks into the room and he gets transported to Egypt.
And just like dead on the spot. I think
that's cool. I really think that's cool.
Yeah.
But like the elevator stuff and the aspect with like the kids are sometimes afraid of the ghosts in the house, and sometimes it seems like they're evil. They should have just picked one. And I think I think that fix would have like completely saved this movie, honestly, because I like everything else about it. It's got like everything that you can complain about Italian horror films or Fulci films, later period Fulci films in general. All the things that you can complain about are sort of present in this movie, but there's still something about it that I really like.
Yeah. I will say one of the things that is really strong in it is a lot of the acting overall, even from the kids, is really good across the board. I mean, Christopher Connolly is a pretty decent lead. I can't remember who plays the wife. I'm actually gonna go look that up now.
It was supposed to be Catriona McCall, but she turned it down.
Yeah, that was Laura Lindsay, and I liked her. Yeah, I really liked both the kids, Brigitta Boccoli, as Susie, and then even Bob was great, and I really loved. Hopefully, I'm not butchering this pronunciation. Cosimo Ceneri, the Adrian Mercado, the antique dealer / warlock sorcerer dude.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it was a good character.
That character was awesome. Like as soon as he showed up, I was like, okay, you have my interest again now. Okay, what do you got for me here? And I love what that character does. Like that was a really interesting characterization. And the use of that character, I felt as well, that sacrifice he makes, I felt was really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, he's the Father Merrin character of the film for sure. Because there's definite exorcist vibes going on here.
Yeah. Which is, I guess, kind of the thing I guess I would have to say. Like the weird comparison, though, as much as I have my issues with it, that being said, it's a lot better than many other Exorcist ripoffs from this period.
It's
more
different enough, yeah.
It's different enough, yeah. The fact it's got this whole Egyptian curse thing is much more interesting. Like I would probably watch this rather than like Beyond the Door. I would probably go for this much faster. Just because there is enough of the Fulci elements and vibe. The kills that are there are fantastic. That you get to see. I mean the pit death with the spikes, I could hear the Mortal Kombat announcer voice in my head.
I've not had this 100% confirmed by the internet, but I have 100% confirmed it in my mind. Just a funny little fun fact: the actor who is doing the dubbing for the father does a bunch of the voices in Prince of Space. The MST3K Prince of Space.
I would not be surprised, and I certainly would be happy if that were the case.
I'm gonna eventually do a references film of this movie, and I'm even gonna do like a super cut because you can tell in the scream, especially in that moment where he falls down the shaft. It's the same scream that the fighter pilot has when he is like calling back to Major Tower in Prince of Space. And if you look at the company that did the dubbing for Prince of Space, it's Bellucci Productions.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because that's the riff they even make at the
joke.
Front.
Yeah,
that's the joke. Yeah.
So I guarantee that it's the same voice actor who dubs the father in this.
Oh, that's so cool.
I love how I love how grumpy the dad is in this too, and like the wife is so nice to him, and he's just like. She's like, oh, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. And he's instantly just like snaps at her all the time. He's like, oh, well, I'm blind. It's easy for you to say. He's like such a dick. And she's like lighting a cigarette for him, like doing all this stuff for him.
Yeah.
Fucking freaking out all the time. It's like, geez, dude.
Yeah, and that's pretty, and that's the interesting thing about a lot of Italian movies that I still find fascinating about Italian grindhouse pictures is how angrily emasculated and almost like cuckolded by life so many of those male protagonists are, because they're so macho, and like it seemed like the thing in these movies. You see this a lot in the Italian crime movies of the 1970s. Is like you take these macho heroes and you completely just like, no, you're gonna lose, you're gonna get your ass kicked every time you go up against a threat. You're never gonna win, basically. I always find that a fascinating trait. I did like that element that like he's so like pathetic, and it's like he's just a baby throwing a tantrum at times.
Yeah, it adds a tragedy for the audience to latch onto, especially in that culture.
Yeah. And then it also can get extraordinarily frustrating in contraband, but that's a rant for another day. Got it. Contraband's like so close to being a great movie, and then it does a few things for me that just like
Right.
no, thank you.
The first half is really nice.
First half was good. I love that ending. The old guard returns was a fantastic way to end that picture. But
I guess we should talk a little bit about Bob in this movie, and he really does steal the show. He has
lousy lesbian.
He has the best line in the movie.
Yes.
He has the absolute best line. I love that moment. I love that line, calling his sister a lousy lesbian because she says he won't ever be in the MLB someday.
Right.
And she's actually really good, so she says.
Right, and then she's kind of got this like tomboy quality. I wasn't sure if they were like trying to play at that. At like she's not like your like she's an outcast because she's not like a frilly looking girl. That might be like an Italian thing that is just kind of like over our heads, especially living in the United States nowadays.
Certainly. Yeah, this was possible. I mean, it's kind of a bummer that we never get to see these kids at school, because imagining these two superpowered possessed kids.
That's my point. They should have made that decision. What are we doing with these kids? We're gonna make them possessed killers, and they should have stuck with that. There's another little Fulci film that he's credited as just producing, but I mean you can see his influence everywhere. It's a oh god, now I can't remember. It's a Hansel and Gretel. It's called Hansel and Gretel, but it has nothing to do with that. But it's about these children being killed, and then they kind of come back as these demon children. And they could have just took that element and put it in here, and I think that it would have made this movie great because it's shot well. It had enough money behind it. Fulci still seems to be like not turning in some of his more cynical jobs that he did later in his career.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just that aspect. That's the only aspect of this film that I wish there was more of. I like everything else.
I think you could have also built up the supernatural element of their voyages and maybe had the room transform a little bit more. Maybe have like an obelisk in there. Maybe have some sort of like demon come back with them.
Yeah, I suspect that's a lot of what got cut from the budget, because I mean, when your budget's already was supposed to be double the 300K, I suspect that there was a lot more that was supposed to go on. Because I mean, that was the thing that was strange, was just like how like it felt like a light switch, and that things were getting shot out of sequence with regards to like stuff coming in and out of the room. And it does create again that very dreamlike atmosphere where things suddenly go back to normal, because like, and you don't know how much time has passed or if you're in the same linear time frame, at least that's your brain is telling you that. And it was fascinating though to see like suddenly it's like there's sand everywhere, and then this happens, and like then thinking, wait, that stopped. Was there a scene missing in between here? And realizing no, they probably had to do the Corman thing and just tear out pages and chuck them in the dirt.
Yeah, it could be that. I always kind of thought that maybe he was kind of going back to what had worked so well with or been successful in the Beyond and the Gates of Hell, but it's sort of watered down. There was a decision, it says by or rumor is that it was from Fulci, that he wanted to like not do this one so gory. He was going to do something more appropriate, I guess, for like theaters, and it was just unfortunately he was making the wrong bet there, because he kind of just alienates some of his own fans. But I think those like sequences are just, I'm gonna do like these dreamlike little scary vignettes and it's all gonna work out. But when it's just somebody falling in an elevator, it doesn't work nearly as well as tarantulas eating somebody.
Right. And that's actually the one I think actually strength I do feel about him taking that approach of being a little more restrained, was that I love the ending kill of this movie. It's easily my favorite part of the film, or at least my favorite scene in the movie, is the bird attack at the end with the reanimated taxidermied birds in the antique store.
I love how he calls out that they're stuffed.
Yeah. And it's I love especially like when it's all over, and I mean, first of all, the the mold they did of his head, of the actor's head, and then, have the bird prop, tear open the flesh and the blood starts coming out, and then cutting, like, it cuts really well together for those close-ups. And actually really they're close-ups but not extreme close-ups, which is often how they would hide like the throat slits and things like that in giallo movies. It's really impressive work. And I love the detail that when the birds are all back on their perches the way they were, and they're all bloody and the stuffing's been sort of like falling out of them, to show that they've been in flight and they've been moving. And so they're tearing their stitches and all that. There's something wonderful about the payoff of it. And it's one of the strengths I feel of the movie is that even though it's at times frustrating to get to that conclusion for me, I love that that slow burn to something so big, and it is one of the biggest set pieces in the film. It's like, yeah, like, okay, I can't hate this movie because of that. I still feel disappointed overall, but like that won me over in that last like 30 minutes, especially with that kicker at the end.
Yeah, because this is your first time seeing this movie, correct?
Yeah. It's been less than 24 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen this one quite a bit. Like I said, I really liked it at first. I still really enjoy this one. I watch this one pretty often, actually. I find it fun. I find the beginning of this movie to be like up there with some of Fulci's better films.
How old were you? I just want to ask, how old were you when you first saw the film?
Gosh, I must have been right about 16 or 17.
That might explain it. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually first saw this with a girl that I was sort of seeing at the time. I went to movie Madness. And just I had like just Fulci films. I just grabbed random ones that I had never heard of. And it was when I first started really getting into Fulci as a director and not just his zombie movies. And yeah, there was something about it that I really liked. I really thought it was like pretty fun. Like an overall pretty entertaining movie. I also love the it's toward the beginning. There's like the thunderstorm and she wakes up and sees the blind witch. I think that's really cool. There's, I like the aspects of like children kind of having like this bond with the afterlife and stuff. There are elements to it that I think are really kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's other things. I was skimming through it a little bit as we were kind of getting kind of slow start today to get us all together for the podcast. And one of the things I thought was fascinating was how they do try to have like sort of connective imagery. I thought it was interesting that the concept of excavating this thing to solve a riddle. So you have these riddles and puzzles of the ancients, and then as the dad's doing he got the tape recording, and he's documenting like this, he's trying to solve this puzzle of the symbols and the temple, and then you cut to, and I think that there might even be a little bit of the soundtrack overlaid, maybe not, but it's you see the daughter in bed, and then Bob playing with a Rubik's cube, and it was an interesting way of bringing the past to the future, and the idea, because my brain suddenly went, oh hey, lament configuration, and then that was a reminder of how there is this interesting aspect of the old coming into the new, and how there's certain aspects that are continuous, and it's a theme that's brought up even if it's not able to be fleshed out entirely. But I thought it was kind of cool to have that element of like there is still the old ways still exist in our society, or exist in our culture, and exist in our it's a part of the human experience, is to solve the puzzle that there is this undercurrent of like maybe there's something, maybe we should not know these things, and because the kids obviously is playing with it. And I think that might precede, I'm going to double check, but that may precede the moment when Bob goes into the door and kind of joins that force and becomes the other possessed kid.
Is that around the same moment where Bob is whistling the soundtrack to the movie?
Yes.
I love that point too. I love that. That's an interesting little detail, like the sometimes diegetic, sometimes non-diegetic theme to this movie.
So speaking on the Bob factor, how many Bobs out of 5 are we giving this one? And by the way, I forgot. I think for House by the Cemetery, I would give House by the Cemetery 3.5. I don't think I actually stated that earlier. Just making sure that's reiterated.
That's a bit lower than I thought.
For House by the Cemetery. Yeah.
Well, I'm with you on that one, Chris.
Yeah. It probably will go up to a 4 in time for House, but for Manhattan Baby, it's kind of it's a 3 for me out of 5. 3 bobs out of 5.
Wait, so House by the Cemetery is only half a bob?
Well, we're going on a scale of 5. If it was going on 10, then I would put Manhattan Baby at a 5 bobs out of 10, and I would put House by the Cemetery at a 7 to a 7.5 out of 10.
Okay. All right.
So it's scaling is strange. Yeah. I realize in hindsight I should have gone with the 10 scale. I've been using the 10 scale in the Laverne and Shirley podcast I do with my girlfriend, and it's like, okay, that works much better for scaling. Figuring that out.
I said out of 5 on the last podcast, and I think it just kind of stuck.
Yeah, and it's fine. It's a work in progress.
So what did you think, Michael? What did you think about this?
I liked it a little bit less than House Cemetery. This one I'd probably give 2.5 bobs out of 5 bobs. There were some interesting elements. I definitely agree that it was a little bit toned down from some of Fulci's key hallmarks. That being said, a lot of it was still there. Definitely a lot of the camera work was very Fulci. I love some of the elements, like the practical Joker guy getting killed. Mm-hmm. I thought it was really funny how there was little bits of humor in there. I think the first line the dad says is like, "That's a lot to put on a 9-year-old." That really got me. Him putting the glasses over the bandages and just looking ridiculous.
God, I forgot to mention that. Yeah. Oh, that got the biggest laugh out of me.
Yeah, I love the laser beam special effects, the blue light overlay on the footage. Mm-hmm. That's a really fun one. Just shooting the snake. There's some crazy moments with animals in this.
Yeah.
And that was probably a real kill of that snake, wasn't it? Yeah, which given my dad's stories of getting chased by a black mamba once, yeah, cool, thanks, good shot. I don't mind that at all.
I also really like this kind of like deep red shot of the toys, like close up of the toys on the stairs.
Oh man.
But then there's some convoluted stuff like the Polaroid, Mercado coming to the house. It wasn't really clear. I mean, it was clear, but it felt a little lazy the way they did it, how he was possessed. But poor Susie. So it just lacked a couple elements for me that I enjoyed a little bit more in House. One other thing I want to call out is the god's name. Ostensibly the evil god who's doing all this. Do you guys remember what his name was? It's kind of ridiculous.
I don't
either.
Habadubada?
That's probably why I didn't remember, because it's like, no, it can't.
I wonder if that's just a dubbing thing.
Habadubada.
They make something up.
I'm just trying to think of that in an Italian accent. It's like habadubada. Like, no.
One final thing, I love how when we're having this MacGuffin explained, the Mercado talks about the amulet or whatever, and he kind of describes it as like a mood ring, and the wife's like, "Oh yeah, I got one of those."
Yeah, as if it's like it's accurate. Like that was that got me too. And now that I think about it, I'm almost kind of wondering if one of the issues I have with this film was I was too fucking tired when I watched this movie, and I need to like let it simmer and like go back to it and watch it a second time. So, oops.
Oh, I'm sure it could grow on you.
Yeah, it's one that it hasn't really fell very much since the first time I saw it. I mean, I still feel about the same way that I feel about it. There are some aspects, a lot of aspects of this film that I really like. I think it's pretty funny. The dubbing is pretty funny. I think that it moves at a decent pace too. Visually, it's a beautiful film, and in its like historic context with Lucio Fulci and producer Dardano Sacchetti or writer Dardano Sacchetti, right? It's his last one and the last one of producer Fabrizio De Angelis.
Yep.
Both of their last ones with Fulci. It's interesting. I mean, I almost feel like there could be like, a behind the scenes documentary of this one. It would be interesting to see, to learn a little bit more about how it just kind of collapsed on them, all three of them, because essentially this is where people mark the downfall of Fulci films, and there definitely is like a noticeable change in quality in all the films that come after Manhattan Baby. This is kind of like the last that has that that look to it that his more well-known films do. There's nothing, like I said, there's nothing really about it that bothers me all that much, other than I wish they would have gone a little further with some of the gore and just said, hey, the kids are possessed. We're going to do spooky things with the kids being possessed. And it's like they started doing that with the nightmare sequence, or the nighttime sequence with the thunderstorm, and she sees the blind woman, and then she goes into her parents' room, and everything, all of that. It's like they were going in this direction that I think could have elevated this film to being maybe like up there with some of his better films. And it's just the middle of this film that kind of seems like there's a couple of different there's just too many cooks in the kitchen trying to like add these little things, and
maybe trying to fix it.
Maybe trying to fix it, or just you had these three longtime collaborators who ended up not working with each other after this. I mean, maybe it was a case of you had these three people who thought that they were the mastermind of these films, and one person saying we need more Exorcist stuff, and then you had another person saying we need more of this like weird kind of dream logic-y things that we did in the Beyond, and then you had
jazzy Manhattan music, jazz. You gotta get more of that in there.
And maybe at a certain point, maybe you just had all three of them just disagreeing just because they didn't like each other at this point, and saying, no, we're going to do this. And it just kind of, it kind of pulls the film out of itself during the middle. But overall, I really enjoy this one. I give House by the Cemetery a 4 to 4.5 on a good day. This one's, I think a solid 3 to 3.5, maybe 3.5. I definitely don't dislike this one as much as a lot of other Fulci fans dislike this one. I think Bob is funny. He's used perfectly in this movie, right? If you're not a fan of Bob, you might like him in this one as opposed to House by the Cemetery. He doesn't have sparingly. To he kind of comes up and just has like these one-liners.
Yeah.
Every now and then. And he's pretty funny. The scene, I know that they just had to do this to reveal the necklace, but it always shocks me when he just like randomly unbuttons his sister's shirt.
Yep. I saw that again when I was reviewing. It's like, what the hell? Oh my God.
Yeah, he just like rips her shirt open. Like, swear on your cross. And tears her shirt open to reveal the necklace. That's always kind of, that makes me chuckle. I really like this one. I really like Manhattan Baby.
Yeah, I would agree. I liked it, but it was more middle of the road for me, so I'm sticking with a 2.5 Bob's out of 5, or halfway.
Yeah, I mean, I'll at least be friendly enough to give it, a 3, but it's a, kind of a, if I'm not in the mood for it, kind of a 2.5. But yeah, it's like, especially as Michael, you were pointing out a lot of the stuff that I remembered liking while I watched the film, but I've forgotten since, because of my brain deciding to be a jerk. There's a lot of cool stuff. There's some wonderful visuals in this film. It's a lot of ideas. I think that's, for a filmmaker to watch this, I think you can get a lot of wonderful inspiration for just visual ideas that you can be like, ooh, how can I take that and twist that?
For sure.
How can I play with that? Like, even just the visual of the guy in the elevator trying to pull the doors open and his like fingernails are bleeding. Mm-hmm. He's tearing his fingernails off. I love that. Like, that's an awesome, like, powerful visual to me.
Yeah. Funny enough, the film that I just shot that Michael did the sound on, this movie and House by the Cemetery were the two that that I was watching a lot. I mean, it's funny. I know that Chris, you mentioned when you saw the trailer that I showed you for it, you were wondering if all that like blue and red lighting was a Bava influence, and it is, because obviously Fulci is doing kind of like a Bava thing, but this movie in House by the Cemetery uses like a lot of blues and reds, especially like when Jamie Lee comes face to face with the stone. There's like this weird moment, and it goes completely blue. I think the same thing happens to like the weird professor guy that you guys like so much, Adrian Mercado. There's a whole sequence where his lighting goes blue. There's there's a lot of visual aspects to this movie that I enjoy ripping off.
Quick realization as I was again skimming through trying to find the blue dabba-dee moments, was we didn't mention Dr. Forrester, played by Lucio Fulci.
Right, and Fulci is also in House by the Cemetery as well. He's the guy's boss. He's Paolo Marco's boss.
I didn't catch that.
Because he fancied himself a Hitchcockian type. He's in all of his movies. He plays a part in every single film, and he's the doctor who is like walking down the street with Paolo Marco, and he's like, "You need to go figure out why our friend killed himself." Yeah, Fulci's in all of his movies. That's right. Yeah, he's another doctor. He always plays either a doctor or like the boss of like some newspaper or something.
Yeah, well, when you get to that age, it's easier to play those parts than to be like, "Hey, I'm the swinging bachelor. Hi."
Well, have you seen A Cat in the Brain?
I've been meaning to for years. I saw the trailer, but I've not watched the film. But I know what you speak, because he's
Jesus Christ.
He's practically the lead in that, right?
He is the lead. He's himself. Man. He directs it. He's the star. And that's one that Fulci. See, it's funny. This is where I differ. Diehard Fulci fans hate movies like Manhattan Baby and Voices from Beyond, and a lot of movies that I really, really like a lot that end up kind of in my top 10. I mean, Manhattan Baby, I think I'd have to go back and look, but I think it cracks my top 10. And people people hate those films, and they love A Cat in the Brain, and that's one where I try to go back. I try to understand. I don't want to be a contrarian. No one wants to be left out on the joke, right? You want to get it, and I don't get that one. It's a doozy of a film, Cat in the Brain. You ought to check it out just for morbid curiosity.
Will do.
But he's the lead in that film.
So anyway, I was trying to do my best to segue because we're at the almost hour and 40 moment. So with our next film, which is moving away from the world of Fulci, but it will involve a director that I will probably having to be resisting to recommend other of his films. Warriors of the Wasteland, aka Il Nuovi Barbari, or The New Barbarians, by Enzo G. Castellari, with probably the least amount of Bob out of these three, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see how much. Yeah, he definitely has more screen time in Manhattan Baby. He maybe doesn't have anything more to do in Manhattan Baby.
He's kind of more important in this one. Like, you give him kind of a more fun role.
For sure.
Oh yeah. This is where the it's like, oh my god, these kids are in these R-rated movies. Like, oh, he must have had a blast on this film, getting to like work on the cars and kill people with a slingshot and run around the wasteland. And I mean, dude, there's even the implication he's driving the car, and
right. And it's weird because when I watch this movie, man, I'm always like, is he supposed to be like, he's just super smart, I guess, but there's at times where I'm like, is he just supposed to be like a weird, like kind of midget guy? How is this guy survive the apocalypse? Is he full grown? Is he just weird? Is he like a mutant? No, he's just a kid.
We have no idea. I mean, there is a post-apocalyptic fiction trope of the super genius whiz kid. It's pretty. I mean, like Turbo Kid is a great example of that. Where even though he's still a dork and still a boy, that's and actually Turbo Kid, in my opinion, takes a lot from New Barbarians. That being said, is he's still like. Even though he's like 15 in that movie, there's so much that Turbo Kid is capable of that he really shouldn't be. So that's where it's like, okay, it's the fantasy whiz kid sort of thing. And I think, to be honest, a lot of the reason that he is a kid in the movie and it's kind of supposed to be one is because, well, Road Warrior had a kid, so obviously we need to have a kid in here too. And they may have just even changed a character from the script into being a boy instead of like being an adult, just because it's like, well, we have to have a kid in here and there's no other parts we can have them with dialogue, and we've got this kid on contract, so let's do it. So
this movie probably also has like the most recognizable cast to someone who's not like an Italian horror fan, right? I mean, you got Fred Williamson in there.
Yep.
George Eastman, who is, maybe one of you guys can answer this. I mean, I know it's easy to look up, but is George Eastman, did he also do like softcore porn or something? Because he always seems to turn up in these roles where he's like raping people or fucking people or getting naked, like, and he's just like this big giant, like, man, like ripped dude. It kind of, every time I see him, I'm like, was he a porn star before all this?
I mean, you got to figure he had something, because I know, because I am having to look some of this up, unfortunately, because I mean, I'm more familiar with his work in the Italian stuff, because I even want to say, like, you're right though, because isn't he even in Rabid Dogs as one of the weirdos in that, the Mario Bava's crime movie? I want to say.
I'm not sure. I'm mostly familiar with him he worked for Lamberto Bava and
D'Amato a bit.
D'Amato a lot. And in those movies, like, I've done a reference to this film for Delirium, and he's just naked and having sex with the female lead in that movie the whole time. That's like his whole purpose of being in that movie.
I mean, looking at his filmography, I mean, this dude basically, started at the beginning of or I guess during the middle of the heyday of the spaghetti western period in '66. Because, for context, in '64 is when Fistful of Dollars comes out, and by '66 there's like 66 and '67. There's probably like 150 different spaghetti westerns that were made during that period, and like in terms of the good, like some of the best come out from that period. So he's comes in right there, and then he's in a ton of those, but he does end up getting to have some of the little, a little more off the beaten path with like one of the OSS 117 movies.
Right. Yeah. He does like Porno Holocaust and Erotic Nights of the Living Dead for D'Amato. So yeah, it looks like he kind of got into some of the softcore.
Yeah. Because he's even in like an Emmanuel and Francois picture, which, I mean, assuming that's one of those in name only. Yeah. It's a Joe D'Amato.
Right. He does a Caligula movie in '82. Yeah. So, all right.
Yeah. And then
he's just got that vibe.
Yeah, he does, and I did confirm he was indeed in Rabid Dogs, which is one of my favorite Bava movies too. I love that movie. So I mean, and George is fantastic in this movie too. I think I love Fred Williamson in this movie. I love George Eastman in this movie. I mean, I have to say of these three films, this is probably, it's not my favorite of them per se. I would say I think at this point, I think House by the Cemetery finally squeaks by, but it's one of the ones I feel most passionately about. It's and part of it is really comes down to it's Castellari. I love Enzo Castellari movies, except for his shark movie, which is the famous Italian. I think what was it called? The Last Shark or Great White, I think was right. And it's the one that was banned because of the lawsuit from Universal.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically Jaws and Jaws 2, but with a plastic shark.
And it's really bad. It is really bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, because what's cool about, making this interesting pivot from one side of the Italian grindhouse, side of horror and going to what Castellari was doing, where he was doing a lot of just what anyone like would basically pay him to do. And what he did well was mostly was crime movies and action films. He was a stunt guy who moved into directing. And so like he gets, his kind of first major success was Kill Them All and Come Back Alone, which I think I gotta double check. I'm pretty sure it's got Chuck Connors in it. Yeah, Chuck Connors and Frank Wolf in it. That's kind of a good, like, kind of men on a mission picture. And then during the mid 70s, he does this wonderful string of like these really good, not even necessarily Polizio Tecce movies, but these films that often were just Italo crime. So you got like The Big Racket is hands down my favorite. Street Law has a fantastic scene where Franco Nero is outrunning a Mustang, like a bullfight, which is fantastically staged and is a kick-ass Guido and Maurizio D'Angelo soundtrack, you know, and he keeps doing these films like this. And then as the 80s start to happen, he has to start adapting to what because the crime movie basically like dies out really suddenly. And so then in the 80s, he starts doing all this like sci-fi or fantasy sort of stuff. So he does, you know, The Bronx Warriors and Escape 2000. So you can thank Enzo Castellari for You Must Leave the Bronx on MST3K. And then as well, you know, you know, in this picture, you know, this is all what I'm getting around to why I'm bringing up all this like history of like, you know, okay, so this guy's an established director. And I'm trying to find out when this film was shot because okay, let's take a look at the release date here. I'm going to do a comparison. Okay, the very first release of this movie was June of 1983 for Warriors of the Wasteland. I'm going to look up Road Warrior release date 1980s because my suspicion is, okay, so Road Warrior was initially released in Australia in 1981 at the very end of like December 1981. And then let's see when it came out in Italy. Just, again, context is coming. Release date in the United States was May of 1982. Its release in Italy was it was my birthday actually, August 18th, 1982. That means that this film, as one of the many Italian ripoffs of Mad Max and Road Warrior, done to the point that this film has even got them wearing the silly headbands and the puffy, you know, winter wear in the desert or in the wasteland, is essentially released within less than a year. And it was probably even shot, you know, just like as fast as possible. So this is pure Italian cinema. This movie becomes a hit. Let's make a whole fucking genre based off of it. And it's awesome.
It is indeed awesome. And they do such a great job of like having such grand ambitions and such grandiosity to what they want to show on camera. And they almost pull it off in a believable way. Mm-hmm. Sometimes failing miserably, but it's an admirable attempt to get a Mad Max clone in there. And I just love the kind of Western post-apocalyptic sci-fi style that they're going for.
Oh yeah, it's basically just a spaghetti western in the post-apocalyptic wasteland. I mean, the scenes are even staged and shot the exact same way.
Right.
Yeah, with the showdown at the end, of course.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, and the bulletproof vest that he's wearing. That's ridiculous see-through plastic armor. Oh.
Yeah. I love how he puts that on. It's almost like no one's allowed to humiliate me but myself.
Sadly, these post-apocalyptic Mad Max ripoffs are not really my thing. I wouldn't rule it out. I definitely like them. Unfortunately for the New Barbarians, for me, if I'm gonna watch something like this, I usually tend to go with something like Aftermath or Dead End Drive-In or something that's
got a little more going on.
Get a little bit. It's got a little bit of something that's different, some different elements to it. That being said, there are some things that I really like. I love the way this movie opens. I love the opening credits, which always, every time I watch it, I always go, "Oh, it's this is a Troma release." Because that cityscape looks like the Troma logo, and then the nuke hits it, and I'm like, "Oh, wait, nope, that's actually the opening."
Not to be too pedantic, but that would be out of place in a Troma movie opening. That being said,
no,
but,
yeah,
but yeah, exactly. It's that something's amiss, something's wrong at that point.
I do like the man rape aspect to this. Actually, that's
so good. Yeah.
The thing that does get me about that is that because also doesn't Fred Williamson also rape a woman in this? Doesn't he have like a famous? Or is that a different one?
You're thinking of a different. No. Fred's been involved in other as well. I will say he's for sure. Yeah, because there is a film. I will not mention its name because I don't want everybody screaming at me because that was just the time. But yes, there's one of the Blank Charlie movies from the early 70s where there is the version I watched had that cut out because the Germans cut that version out, that scene out. But yeah, no, he's done rape scenes in the past, and also recently there were some allegations that came out about his harassment of a makeup artist on VFW. Actually, that's very recent. Literally, that was like 4 days ago. I think that broke out. So,
God
but
damn it, Fred. But
yeah.
Anyway, getting back to my point on that is that, you know, in Italian movies, exploitation movies at this time, obviously, their handling of rape scenes involving women are not done super tastefully. Obviously, It's just like, all right, here's a wide shot so we can see all of your anatomy, get naked, and you know, men are gonna like this.
Right.
You know, is usually the way it's handled. But when George Eastman is raping another man, they're like, well, there's no way this is gonna be sexy, so we're gonna like cut away and do all this stuff with lighting and do this stuff with music.
I see where you're going with that. Yeah,
they took a lot of consideration in the man rape and tried really hard not to make it, because you could, like, when you watch it, you kind of go, wait, does he get raped?
Yeah. It takes a second to realize, that it happens.
Or you know, it's not very gratuitous, which. On my end, I'm like, oh, that was a missed bet. I think they should have done it just as distastefully.
Right.
I really went for it.
I understand where you're coming from with that. The thing is, I haven't seen all of Castellari's filmography. There's still some gaps, and actually some stuff that I don't think even has been released in the States yet. But the big film of his, the Big Racket, was one of his major Italian crime films, and actually has two rather major rape scenes in the film, and they're of women specifically. And they are done in a kind of similar fashion, in the sense, like, so I think rape as a concept in these movies was not something he was into, and he really didn't want to make them titillating or, you know, make them sexualized, you know, or it's like sexualized violence. They were sexual violence, but not sexualized violence. Because in the Big Racket, there's one where the girl is clearly, I think, is over 18. She's over the age of consent, but that she's supposed to be like 14. She looks very young, and that scene is done entirely surrealistically. It's done more like a British crime, you know, surrealist film from that period. And then the second scene is very much a take on the scene from Death Wish, but it's done way more intense and way more horrifying. Because they, at the end of that scene, they piss on her and then set her on fire and burn her alive. So that was like so it was a case of where I think his perspective about it was not that rape was something of like, okay, we're going to get our jollies and get the nudity and the sort of that Sergio Martino distastefulness, you know?
Right. Like a Jess Franco kind of thing.
Right. Exactly.
He's like the worst about it.
Oh, absolutely. He's one. Yeah, definitely. I think that'd be a hard battle between Franco versus Martino on that one. So I think that was kind of his thing, was not necessarily that they did it as to make it as disgusting or as flamboyant. I think that was just him stylistically, because that just seemed to be because there's opportunities in his other films that, you know, he could have had a rape scene in multiple other movies, and he does not go for it. And
the Bronx Warrior movies are actually pretty tame in some of those aspects.
Yeah, I mean, that's not to say the female characters are necessarily treated better. They're often, again, like background props. It's kind of like,
for sure,
it's almost Shang-Chi, John Woo level, you know, where, you know, John Woo wasn't really great with his female characters really until, I'd say, Hard Boiled and onwards, to be honest. Oh, okay, The Killer. And yeah, but anyway, back on track to New Barbarians, though. Yeah, I mean, that was something. I mean, I say it was good. It's good in the sense that I'm glad they went for it, because that was, and especially it figures the Italians would, because my God, they are homophobic in their grindhouse pictures. It's so fucking disturbing. I mean,
their culture is pretty much like that, though.
Yeah, it is. It's not great.
it only somewhat relates, but I mean, do either of you guys watch The Sopranos? I mean, that's my favorite TV show.
I've been meaning to for years. I haven't gotten around to it.
That's a big
same here.
That's a big part of that as well, with like the older generation being very like homophobic. That's like, and there's a whole season that's about that with a character that they figure out is closeted gay, who's within the family, and it's like this big thing. It's kind of like this internal struggle with all of them trying to come to terms with that. So yeah, I think in their culture in general, it's all their men are very macho. I mean,
there's a lot of machismo in this movie.
Yeah, and it's movie's so goofy too. The cars and everything are just so funny, and they're like trying to rip off scenes from Mad Max, like the refinery scene from Road Warrior, but in this one it's just like this little like convoy of cars.
They've got nothing resource wise. There's nothing there.
Zero on this movie. And it's just not my favorite of this type of genre, but this genre isn't necessarily, like I said, my cup of tea. I do find this movie enjoying though. I enjoy it quite a bit. I like the Templars. I love the dubbed line. I'm guessing it's not really this in Italian, but George Eastman rips the Bible in half and he's like, "Damn books are the cause of this whole thing."
Right.
Oh, and I imagine religion is the cause of this whole thing.
Well, and I mean, it's hard to say because, I mean, what I love about the cult is that they're essentially a complete full-on death cult. Their idea is to basically wipe out the human race and then die themselves, and then that's it.
Because it was supposed to have ended during the nuke, right?
Right.
That's their whole view.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea. Is like the the heirs of the nuclear apocalypse, must be destroyed. I mean, that's what a concept. And going back to the dialogue, the goofy dialogue is I love. There's that exchange with Fred Williamson and the lead Giancarlo Prete, Scorpion. They come to they're confused as to why they're getting charity from this little convoy, little caravan of survivors. And what is it? I can't remember the exchange. Fred Williamson says they believe in something. Yeah, I hear it's called God. And oh God, hearing that line again just killed me. It was just like, oh wow, the delivery is so good. It's just like I love how there's those wonderful post-apocalyptic tropes like that, throughout the film and make just such goofball bullshit. And those weird there's so much plastic. And I love that, the crazy scavengers in the first act are all wrapped in plastic. It's like there's no way those guys would ever be stealthy at all with what they're wearing, and like how it's supposed to be sexy when the girl's laying on the plastic bed, with her plastic clothes, and it's like,
oh, I know, that's so bizarre looking, and like the plastic dome that's in his car is just
everything's so bubbly.
Oh God, yeah. This is Bubble Wrap the movie. It was sponsored by Bubble Wrap, I'm sure.
That like when they were like coming up with like the concept of this, and they had like they hired some guy to design all this stuff, and they're looking at the drawings and like, this is gonna be awesome. And then they show up and there's just like a bunch of tubing, like plastic tubing and saran wrap. And fuck, how are we gonna make this work?
Yeah. Oh God, totally. Yeah. And like even the kids really cool, Bob's awesome little box food truck thing.
RV,
as RV. You never really see it except for that one location. You see a bunch of cool weird plastic windmill, wind power, wind and solar power shit on the side. Never gets used again. It never gets used in the battle. It's just there for those scenes when they go visit the garage and bam, it's done, and I don't know if it's it doesn't work, but fuck the Thermion argument here, man. Let's get that shit in the movie. Sorry, I'm very passionate about this film.
I want to call out that all their cars do stuff. It's like they did that extra little bit where things are popping out, things are swinging open.
It's like a speed racer. They all have speed racer gadgets.
Yep. Yeah, they got the rockets out the boot. They have the little spinny blades. I love the spinny blade when when Scorpion the hero jumps on the vehicle. That I think it's checking the character's name again. It is
the Mohawk. That's Mako.
Mako, who's the guy with the ponytail with the purple hair, and he's got the spinny blade on it. So Scorpion jumps at the back, and the thing's spinning, and he just goes boop with his boot, and the thing just snaps right off. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, this badass tool that's like fragile as fuck. Like, it's like it gets snagged on someone's spinal column, it's gonna just be clean and gone, and take it to the shop. It's another $5,000 worth of repair work.
Yeah, that's the thing. You only get to use it on one kill, and then it's like disposable.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, it was great. And the flamethrowers were fun. And I love the gore in this movie. That was the thing that sold me on this when I saw the trailer before I got tracked it down, was like, holy shit.
All the heads exploding from the arrows. Fred Williams has the best. He's got the best weapon, I think, in this.
Easily.
And I think this predates Rambo using exploding arrows too. So I think
you're right. Let me just double check. But
I think Fred Williamson might be the first like badass action hero to.
You are correct. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah. It is. Rambo First Blood Part 2 is May 22nd, 1985.
Yep, Fred Williamson beat him to it.
For a lot of the characters, they have kind of a cool like comic book style. Like he almost has like the Infinity Gauntlet on his like left arm
with all the different tips. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that outfit is ridiculous, and I love it. It's so like, it would be on like one of those like low budget heavy metal album covers, like for a band that's really not that great, but they got this really great artist to do this idea, and they're like through all these ideas of like Boris Vallejo or something. And it's like, and he's got like this gauntlet that's like gold plated, and it's got all these little notches for like exploding arrow tips, and like one's explosive with fire, and one's just like concussive, and one to smoke, and you just imagine the artist taking notes, like, all right, I'm gonna see what I can do, and it comes up with something like really badass but completely weird and impractical and bizarre.
Yeah, I mean the Templars costumes are just, I mean, it looks like a bad 80s hair metal band.
It does.
A lot of shoulder pads.
Yeah, a lot of shoulder pads on the kind of like flowy stuff. And it's like, all right, you're going to have the super long blonde hair, and you're going to have the mohawk. And it's so goofy. And it's at its best when it's taking itself overly seriously too. It's so great.
The first dead body you see in the film after that opening of the trauma style city is a corpse that's like in a
plastic
suit.
skeleton.
Yeah, the plastic skeleton, but it's a female skeleton, and there's like dome boobs.
The dome boobs. Yeah. So she was gonna rock out.
That's the movie that you're in for when you're watching this movie.
Yeah. So she must have tried to go through the apocalypse, rocking out with the titty out.
Yep. Yeah. Oh my God, this movie, man. Like I said, I wish I was maybe a little bit more into the Mad Max ripoffs, because I can definitely see why people would love this movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, for the most part, I usually gravitate to some of the other ones that have something different about them. This one's just so Mad Max, whereas even his other films, even his other films like Bronx Warriors and stuff have like a different element to it. The settings are a bit different. And
I mean, what I love about Bronx Warriors is that it's this wonderful combination of the Warriors Escape from New York, a little bit Mad Max. It's this wonderful amalgamation. Here it's so directly this one thing they're trying to do that it's basically just like, okay, we're going to take the aesthetic of Mad Max and graft it onto a generic Django ripoff. Because that's, I mean, with the cult and everything, this is very Django, and because and very spaghetti, 60s spaghetti western, and that's all well and good. I have no problem with that conceptually, but I agree. Like there's not as much going on, with it as a plot, and it weakens it. And the other Mad Max ripoffs, I sadly haven't seen Dead End Drive-In, which sucks because I've actually met.
Oh, it's so good.
And I've met Brian Trenchard Smith. He's an awesome dude, and I feel bad that like whenever I speak to him, it's like I love Sun Rock and Man from Hong Kong, and it's like all I could talk to him about. But yeah, it's like if you're gonna rip off these films, you got to do something different. That's, I mean, kind of indicative, I think, of what was happening with Italian grindhouse movies at this time, was that you can see as the 80s begin, they were not really able to kind of add their own spice, and they didn't have the support to the filmmakers to do something completely new with the genres that they were trying to create. Because when you see the spaghetti western and 66, 67, 68, they're super different at times. There's some very generic tropes that come up, but you get films like Navajo Joe or Django or Massacre Time and things like that that are very different. You don't get that same level of creativity with the Mad Max ripoffs and with the and even with like the Conan ripoffs. Like Conquest is a wonderful which you did an awesome focus on recently, is a wonderful way of showing that it's dumb. It's kind of at times hard to watch, but my God, it's creative at times.
Right. It's different enough to where you don't feel like you've already seen the movie once you're a fourth of the way through.
Exactly.
Which The New Barbarians has a bit of that. After about the first quarter of the movie, you kind of go, okay, I sort of get this one. I sort of feel like I know what it is and where it's going. I think that maybe some of the best and different aspects of it are like the rape revenge aspect with our lead hero. They didn't do enough with it. It was just kind of like, well, he kind of gets raped and then it's like not really like a big deal.
The final kill definitely mirrors that though really well.
For sure.
Oh yeah.
I kind of wanted to see more of him, like, it really, being the focus.
Drawing it out, especially like where he's making him realize, oh shit, what is he's going to do? How is he going to use that? And then and just kind of torture him a little bit. Because that's the Wes Craven element. You fucked with the wrong dude. You literally fucked the wrong guy, and now he's gonna get a drill in with a corkscrew up your ass in a car.
I would have liked to have seen that a little bit more. I think that would have made this one different enough. It would have added that different element to it. Maybe if they would have gotten to that aspect quicker. And then the rest of the movie was kind of like an I Spit on Your Grave mixed with Warriors of the Wasteland. Not saying that it would have been like this terrific film or would have made it any better, but it would have made it different enough.
Yeah, you would have enjoyed it for more of the film, I think.
I think I would have been a little bit more on board with it. Like I said, you get about a quarter of a way through this one, and you're okay, I got it. Gotcha. Yep. I got where it's going.
Yeah, and I mean that's one of the problems with, as you're saying, about the timing of that event. I mean, I don't know necessarily if I agree with that concept of moving that shift, but I do know why, or at least my understanding of why it happens when it does, is that is pinpoint to the letter, to the page number practically, the point in the spaghetti western where the hero gets his ass kicked and he has to come back stronger at the end. Happens in Django, happens in Fistful of Dollars, happens in, I mean, that's why like Corbucci's The Great Silence is a fucking masterpiece, is because he sets up that's going to happen and then he completely pulls the rug out from under you with the ending. And again, this is the case where like it needed not something perhaps so drastic, but it needed to do something either in the timing of it or the use of it or the emotions of it. But that actually brings up another quality, just to kind of sort of swerve a little bit, was in Fred Williamson's character in this movie. I was surprised that there's scenes where he's kind of sympathetic and kind of tender or kind of nicer to people. Like there's something, he seemed gentler in this movie than in other films I've seen Fred Williamson in, even other Castellari movies. Because in Inglourious Bastards, he's a pretty tough dude in that. So. But I don't know if anybody else spotted that he seemed more like, the fact that he wasn't begrudgingly saving Scorpion's ass. It was more like, dude, I like you. You're a good guy. I don't want to see you die out here.
Right. Yeah. And they had
a connection. They were like partners.
Yeah. It wasn't just the common foe aspect. He was kind of like, he's sort of like kind of the most righteous person in the Wasteland, Fred Williamson's character.
There's this kind of aspect where it's like Scorpion's like a lone wolf, and Fred Williamson's character is a little bit more like, well, if we stuck together, we might be a little bit safer.
Yeah. Yeah, there's I like I mean, to be honest, as we're kind of moving in the direction of, I feel like Fred Williamson's character, kind of like in Escape 2000, is sort of the real hero of the movie. Because like in Escape 2000, Trash is ostensibly the hero of the movie, and then he goes to the Giancarlo Prete character, who's actually the real hero of the movie, for help. And it feels like Fred Williamson here is kind of the dude that like has to inspire the protagonist to actually like sometimes do the right thing, or tells him the information he needs. And so therefore he is kind of the, as you're saying, the most righteous dude in the Wasteland. And the idea that I love the sort of weird honor code that his whole thing is about strength. I want to be the strongest and defeat the enemies, so I think is interesting, kind of almost like, it was almost like they were trying to give him like the samurai movie vibe, which like kind of half-assedly, is executed, but it was cute.
Yeah, it's also interesting that the very end of this movie is Scorpion sort of like adopting Bob at the end of the movie. There's another weird, like, it's like, oh, we got this kid. I guess we gotta do something with him. That seemed a little forced.
Yeah. And I think it's like, well, we need to have some sort of high note to end this on. It's like, we're going to have a family thing, and for all we know, I mean, it could have just been that Giovanni, really bonded with that actor, and he asked the director, can I do a scene where he comes and takes my hand and he's going to adopt my character at the end of the movie? Right. Like, we have no idea, but yeah.
Which is funny because if Scorpion was open to that, you would think he would do that a lot sooner because Bob knows how to fix cars. He's like super valuable. I think it's interesting that like the Templars, like he's like the most valuable person in the Wasteland. He's just a kid, so he kind of needs somebody, and he's like this wizard with fixing cars.
Now, clearly the Templars have their own version of Bob.
Oh, not the Templars, the Caravan, the Wiz, yeah, who fixes everything.
Right, yeah. I'm talking about the like even the Templars. I think it's funny that like the kid, because he could have easily been like in reality, obviously not.
Sure. I mean, there could have been a scene where someone kidnaps Bob and he has to save him.
Right.
But it's not just because of his skill. It's because he's grown on him.
Right, yeah. Yeah. Bob's an interesting character in this one for sure.
He kind of has a New York accent at times. Did you get?
I did catch that. Yeah. I did. It was fun though. I liked him in this film from the first time I saw him in it, and I didn't make the connection yet. It was the same kid in a bunch of these films. Because I think I'd seen one of the other Bob movies by this point. It wasn't House by the Cemetery.
He's grown quite a bit in just like over a year too. It's so funny how like that happens with kids. He like looks the exact same in 1981 and 1982, but by the time he hit 1983, 84. He's like, he's like maybe 10 or 11 at this point. And you're like, oh wow, he's looks like he's grown up quite a bit.
Yeah, puberty may have hit him kind of early and kind of fast,
Right. And I think kids are just like that. They start growing quick at that age.
The Wasteland has that effect on you.
Yeah. True. It aged him quite a bit.
Yeah. Do you guys remember the right before the final battle, what Bob's advice to Scorpion was?
I can't say I do.
It was the more of a bastard you are, the surer you are to win.
Oh yes, okay. Thank you for reminding me of that. I did love that line.
That's good wisdom.
I always, just a weird sidebar with Italian films. I love how often they use the term bastard. Clearly, it must sound better. Maybe it's a translation issue. Like in Italy, they use it all the time. Because obviously, it's like, I mean, we use bitch here a lot, right? That's an American thing. We use that for like men and women. And it seems like, I don't know if it's like a translation thing. I know that in The Sopranos, everybody refers to each other, even friends, in a playful way, and enemies as a cocksucker. I wonder if like that was the term, but maybe in the 80s they're like, we can't use that. What's a term that you would use for a male? Bastard. Because like everyone in every Italian movie, they're always like screaming, you bastard.
Well, the one thing I know isn't basta something you hear, you have a basta, in a lot of Italian. I hear it a lot in Italian dubs for spaghetti westerns. So I'm researching.
No, but I think that is a word. I think that means.
So it means
like enough.
The lips when they're dubbing it. Then
exactly, that's what I mean. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I see.
Basta means that's enough.
That's what it says.
Okay. So yeah, I guess that makes sense, because if you go to any Italian movie, but the one that for some reason always comes to my mind is the Fragasso movie Shocking Dark, and the lead woman like throws the android dude down the stairs, and she's just screaming bastard. But yeah, she must be saying basta, and it fits. Right, bastard fits the lips when they're dubbing it, but yeah, her saying that's enough, yelling that at someone after you pummel them after they've been pushing you to the limit or something makes a lot more sense. So there you go. We did our little detective work that I probably could have done on my own, but because I know that they do that in Japanese films as well. There's like the great one in Godzilla Raids Again, where the main character refers to his girlfriend as an idiot. In the Japanese version, he calls her Bakara. He calls her a dumbass. But when the English companies were dubbing it, they make him say, banana oil. It's like, what? It just fit the lips, so go for it. So that must be what they're doing here. Yeah. Bastard. It's so out of place. It's like such a lame curse word, even for the 80s, right? Like, no, who says that?
Yeah, I mean, it's all, it's all in how you use it. It's all about the time. But it's an interesting little thought about that. Yeah. Languages, found language in movies I find really interesting because I do notice that there's a certain way to the way it's pronounced in films from the 70s and 80s, which we've lost since, like, I would say, like, the late 90s. Like, I feel like the last time it really was able to, like, hit home was, like, The Big Lebowski. It's almost like there were so many fucks in The Big Lebowski that it, like, undid the weight of the word.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, going back to The Sopranos, once again, that's another good example of it. Like, it beats it into you, all the cursing and all the different words, and then, like, you can't stop using it. Like, I have never used the term cocksucker before, but now I say every time I'm driving. Fucking cocksucker. It's like, it's just a carryover from The Sopranos. Because they use it as, like, a term of endearment. They use it all the time. It's hilarious.
I mean, I guess you can make a good point. Every culture has that versatile swear word that you say in all these different, fashion that could be positive or negative. Right. And it's all about context.
Right. And like, it seems like the one here, at least the popular one nowadays, is bitch, right? I mean, Natalie has a friend that refers to her and their other friends as bitch, right? It's like kind of a term of endearment.
Yeah. Every group's got, like, some, especially if the group is tight enough, there's always the thing. But yeah, I have never had such a thing, which, I don't know. Part of me is kind of glad for it. I'm actually glad that I don't use the word bitch very often. There was a point I kind of realized, like, I wanted to stop using gendered insults just in general. And I actually went, like, a whole year and a half without ever physically verbalizing the word, which was kind of nice, actually.
Yeah, I don't find myself ever really needing to use that one. I definitely yell in traffic, though. So
yeah, well, that's the thing. Things will probably change if I drive. If my rage gaming is,
but I do like to yell at people because they can't hear me, and it doesn't mean anything, so I just yell at other cars. So I probably let loose with some pretty foul language, and it's kind of just in and out at that point.
Which is swirling back from the tangent back to The New Barbarians. That's one thing I would love to have seen, see in more post-apocalyptic films, that I think actually the fact that the kid gets to say bastard is kind of cool. But is that I miss sci-fi movies using creative swearing. I still am a big fan of Battlestar Galactica's fracking.
Yeah.
I know it's stupid, but whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of an eye roller.
Yeah, but it's like it's always nice when there's, like, especially when the term is, like, bizarre. I tried to come up with one of those for my cyberpunk script where there was a curse where instead of saying Jesus Christ in vain, you say Buddha's wrath, which is which, to some people seems like really, like, that doesn't make any sense. And then you read about, like, oh yeah, look what the Buddhists are doing in other parts of the world.
Right.
And it's like, oh boy. But anyway, yeah, we're getting tangential at the pretty far into here. So I guess wrapping up on New Barbarians. So I mean, it seems like we have kind of an interesting spread, across these films of, liking some more than others and things like that. So so how many bobs are we giving this one?
You want me to go first?
You go first, man.
Man, I don't know. I've seen this movie quite a few times, not just for this review. I remember when I bought it, and I was pretty excited to see it. I actually have it, a few different versions of it, but the one that I watched the most is actually on this like Mill Creek,
Oh no,
like 8 movie pack.
Oh my God, blasphemy!
What a bargain.
I could come in at like a 2.5 to 3. Like I said, it's just not really my thing. I think it's at its best above average for an apocalyptic film. But like I said, this is not necessarily my subgenre. So my favorites usually go toward things that have elements of other genre films within the post-apocalyptic warrior wasteland thing. The endless desert stuff kind of I don't know, it kind of bores me a little bit sometimes. There's good action, there's really good action. It's goofy enough to like keep you going and keeps you laughing, and like I said, the man rape probably bumps it up another 0.5 for me. So yeah, like maybe a 2.5, 3, something like that.
Cool. Yeah, for myself, I'm just, I will say that within reason, I'm going to give this more of like a 3 to a 3.5. That may seem kind of low given how passionately I speak about it, but it's more of just taking into account that there are parts of this film that are incredibly slow. As much as I have passion for what I love about it, there are definitely weaknesses. Like, it still bums me out that most of the car chases are either really slow because they're doing an off-road, or they're on what looks like a training course for Formula One racing, or for
right.
which is
dirt
really
bike track or something.
Yeah, it's very awkward. So like those things unfortunately knock it down. But the parts I love passionately about it, and Claudio Simonetti's soundtrack I really love.
Yeah, the music is good. Actually, you know what it probably is? It's probably where like the local rodeo is held.
Oh God, that's that's probably it.
It's gotta
That
be
makes
like
sense.
the local rodeo, because they're like dragging him and stuff.
Oh God,
that's probably like a rodeo stunt double.
Right. It's like the state fairgrounds.
Right, the fairgrounds, or it's the at the very least it looks like some parts of it look like old quarries, which they would use a lot in these, or old like tilling places or whatever the hell. But yeah, because
it's a charming film. It's a charming film for sure.
Exactly, and that's the reason why, as much as it may seem like out of 5, I'm giving it kind of low for how like incredibly impassioned I am about it. But it's a case of, I understand some of its nostalgia. I have like really good memories of watching this with my best bro, and having to and introducing people to it, and just the seeing an audience react to the trailer for the first time was just like, whoa, it was electrifying. So it's one of those kind of pictures. So yeah, it's good. It's a lot of fun. It's a good beer. Like I don't drink, but I would call it like a beer and buddies kind of picture, where you get get your 6 or 12 pack, get your best pals together, and just get ready to laugh and hoot and holler and groan, and then shout at all the great kills, and have a good time. But I would definitely say, do it as like the B movie of a double feature. Do it as your first film, and then put something else on after it, just to kind of give yourself something maybe a little classier, a little bigger. So it's good for like marathons or double bills. But yeah, that's kind of my take. And go check out Castellari. Castellari's got a lot of great movies.
Well, I'd probably give it a 3.5 Bobs out of 5. I enjoyed it a lot, so I'm right there with you, Chris. Very similar perspective. I love how grand it is. Love how goofy it is. I love how weird it is. Soundtrack's amazing. There's so much gratuitous slow-mo, so much gratuitous action. Yeah, I guess going back to the rodeo thing, it's one thing that's difficult is when you show the post-apocalypse, it's kind of like it's too green, but then otherwise it would just be too boring.
Well, and there's a part in the movie though, right, where one of the gals is talking about how they fled to the bunkers, and that the nuclear holocaust had ended at some point, even though this takes place in the far future of 2019, but that. They said that something had happened, and that the radiation had a much shorter half-life than they expected.
Yeah, great narrative workaround.
Yeah, good pseudoscience.
Yeah, but I really like this one. It's definitely in my wheelhouse. I definitely prefer sci-fi and post-apocalypse, and when you put a little bit of Western in there, it's just a perfect trio.
Yeah, just going back really quick, because I mentioned two post-apocalyptic films that I really like, that I would gravitate to before this one, but I'm totally forgetting my favorite one of all time. I like it even more than all the Mad Max movies combined. Is Bruno Mattei's Rats is like my favorite example of like a weird post-apocalyptic movie that they put this spin on it with killer rats, and they're not just kind of stuck out in the desert. They like kind of go different places. You get some different like scenery and ridiculous pseudoscience of people living below the earth and the rats taking over above earth. And that's another one that there are too many movies, I think, for me, that if I'm gonna watch a movie that's in this subgenre, that I would watch before this one. I think is my only grievance with this one.
Cool. So I guess does that clear us all up? We've been ranting for a little longer than I expected, but we took some wonderful little left turns there. So anybody want to just listen to us gab for
2.5 hours is about right, a right par for the course for how long these usually go. We're getting a little bit better with staying on track.
A little.
We're getting a little better. In last week's episode, we went on a tangent for like 45 minutes before getting into the movies. So
that's true. That's true. I'm just amazed. I'm amazed that we were able to make it through at this time frame with the movies.
Exactly.
At least.
So we're getting better. We're getting better at that. It's and this is a pretty decent runtime, 2.5 hours. It's about right for a podcast. Yeah, I mean, this is our quickest turnaround between episodes. It's a week. A week ago we did one, and now we're doing another one. So I guess we got to
go back to the group chat and figure out what the hell we're doing next.
Right. Yeah. So does anyone like I was saying, we were just doing this last week, so I don't know if anything's changed, anything to plug, other than, please go watch Spunk's Not Dead. It's a film that Chris and I both directed segments in. It's on Amazon Prime. Jesus, I Was Evil, my last feature film, is also on Amazon, distributed through Wild Eye, so please support that. Michael, do you have anything you'd like to get the word out about?
Nothing at the moment. There's definitely a lot of projects coming up and a lot of releases in the probably once all this pandemic is over and done with. But yeah, nothing at the moment.
Yeah, the three of us really need to team up to do something.
Absolutely.
I don't think the three of us have worked together. I don't know if I
not at the same time anyway.
Yeah, Chris and I, we haven't worked all that much together. It's more been in passing. We're more
it was like for a day, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's not like dedicated on a project. Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, we've never done like a long project together, which is interesting because we all can do different things. It's not like when you have like three guys who are all just cinematographers, it's like, well, you're never going to get them to all work together, but we all do different stuff.
Yeah, so we have to shoot the same movie 3 different ways.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah, that which actually reminds me, one thing I thought was interesting, just going back to Manhattan Baby for just a quick second, was did anyone notice that some of the New York scenes seem to be using like different film stock than the entire rest of the film? That was very clear that the second unit may have been borrowing some stock from the other crew from Fabrizio's that was out there.
Yeah, that's something that I get used to a lot with Italian films.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems like they had a big, probably like warehouse with film canisters that were just like different locations that they would splice in to their movies. I mean, one that comes to mind is Zombie Holocaust or Dr. Butcher.
Yeah,
that's another one. It's just Fulci. It's like stuff from Fulci Zombie. It's like the same shots reused pretty much, just different takes, maybe.
Wow, I didn't even think of that, but I've never done the comparison. But you're probably right.
They're like literally some of the same sets, and I think they're just different takes. that De Angelis, who clearly, but that's the one thing we didn't mention, is that clearly the person who liked Giovanni Frezza, the person who believed in Giovanni Frezza was Fabrizio De Angelis, this producer, because he seems to be the one who is keeping him employed. He's like the one constant through Giovanni's career.
Right. Yeah. Even because I was checking his IMDb as well, and the last credit he has was an uncredited cameo. It looks like in Demons, and I'm trying to figure out if that was another De Angelis joint, because I thought that was pretty much just solely Argento's company that put that one together. But I would have to check.
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of because he's also, I forget that he's in Lamberto Bava's A Blade in the Dark, which is the same year. And that is,
I'm checking the producer credits.
It's not De Angelis. Oh, but the music is done by Maurizio De Angelis, who I'm guessing is probably related.
Maybe, I don't know, because I know Guido and Maurizio De Angelis did a lot of soundtracks during the 70s, and I think they also did they also did some schlocky cop show and commando movie soundtracks in the mid 80s that are just not great. They were great when they did rock and roll soundtracks. When they moved to synths, oh boy, that wasn't a good move.
Yeah, I wonder how popular of a last name De Angelis is. I mean, it just means from Angeles, right? So maybe.
I would assume so. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, I guess that might be a different thing for a different time. But anyhoot, yeah, I think, Calvin, does that wrap us up? We have our 3 films. We have our little plugs. I got nothing else to plug. I mean, I'm still just doing my usual, like, you want to listen to me talk about Laverne and Shirley with a fellow, with another person, and then occasionally fall into movie references. Then night after night's there, and that's kind of all I got right now.
Yeah, I think that about does it for us, guys. Please consider liking and subscribing to 7th Street Productions, as well as Dark and Moody Productions, which is Chris's production company. He has a YouTube page as well. I think that does it. Until next time.